for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Welcome. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah, man. Today's Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018. 278 days into the new year, just 87 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California, and I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planets. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? Got a great show tonight. Great week here on Fade to Black. And tonight, Chance Gardner is here. That's right. We're going to be talking about Magical Egypt. And he has been kicking off a 2-week online symposium, Magical Egypt, with virtually 2 weeks, 2 straight weeks of the best researchers and guests. How do I know? Because I'm going to be one of those guests tomorrow. So we'll see you guys over there for that. Chance Gardner is here tonight. And coming up in a few short minutes, Graham Bonnet guitarist Kurt James is going to stop by. That's right. Going to talk a little guitar, a little paranormal. That's right. Tomorrow night, we have a new 20 and back insider. His name is Jason Rice, and he will be here for a very special Fade to Black exclusive interview. That is tomorrow. What a week on Fade to Black. Thursday, another Fader night with open lines all night long. John Rappaport, of course, will be here with his No More Fake Newsroom Live, followed by open lines all night long. You know I'm a big social media guy. You know where to go and find me. First on Stellar.com, ONSTELLAR.com, onstellar.com. Of course, Twitter, at JChurchRadio. You can follow me right there. Facebook, YouTube. We've been, we went back and pulled, we've got about 300 shows that were shot on video for the Bunker Cam that were never released on YouTube. So we are going through and releasing that huge library of live video stuff. And if you want to check it out, it is there. And we're getting through it now. I think we did another 20 or so shows today. And there you go. So we're you know, it's a back catalog of stuff. And if it's one thing, the Fadernauts, you know, got to see all of that stuff exclusively, but the rest of the world hasn't. So we're just trying to be fair, you know, let everybody go and check out that vast archive of video that we got. So we're doing that over on YouTube over the next month or so. Any questions or comments, you can do that over on Twitter. Hashtag F2B is the sandbox. Hashtag F2BQ is Fade to Black Questions. Of course, we have 2 chat rooms always open, one on Spreaker and one over at KGRA, the Planet. There you go. So whatever it is, pick your poison. And you can also email throughout the show, Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Let me get to some breaking news. Today, 2 pieces of mail delivered to the Pentagon mail facility yesterday have initially tested positive for ricin. The 2 suspicious envelopes were addressed to Secretary of Defense James Mattis and to Chief of Naval Operations Admiral John Richardson. If ingested, ricin causes nausea, vomiting, and internal bleeding of the stomach and intestines, followed by failure of the liver, spleen, and kidneys, and then followed by death with the collapse of the circulatory system. Ricin, bad news. Bad news. Amazon, huge news. Amazon is set to announce a free ad-supported IMDb streaming service. Seems like everybody is going a la carte these days with their own app and streaming service. Amazon is next, and Amazon, with Amazon Prime, virtually has the market cornered. They're taking it a step further, and they're going with advertising. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where Amazon is now the number 3 advertiser on the internet, and they're just taking things one step further. Also, today, huge news. The first full-size passenger capsule designed to carry passengers at over 700 miles per hour was unveiled today in Cadiz, Spain. Now, according to Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, HTT, the vessel has been built to scale to transport passengers at ultra-super fast speeds through magnetic tubes. Now, they announced today it will have a Las Vegas to Los Angeles trip in only 20 minutes. HTT CEO Dirk Alborn says that a full Hyperloop system would be up and running in just 3 years. Incredible. A team of scientists has created a device which allows human beings to cooperate while playing a game using only their thoughts. The 3-way neural connection called BrainNet operates using 2 devices. 2 EEGs transmit the sender's instructions to the receiver, who wears a transcranial magnetic stimulation, a TMS. Using these devices, the 3 participants share their thoughts and play Tetris together as one. We knew it was coming, that brain interface, and it is here. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, just $2 a month. Click on the podcast banner at jimmychurchradio.com. And also, you can become a Fadernaut over in our membership section over there on our site. Let's get the show cracking. Happy birthday to today. Sting is 67. Comedian, one of my favorites, Brian Regan, today is 61, and I'm going to ask Kurt James about this guy. Slipknot guitarist Jim Root today is 47. On this day in history, in 1836, Darwin returns to England on the HMS Beagle with an awful lot of tortoises that he brought back to England for him to eat at dinner with his friends. Seriously. All right. Fader fact. Space. Now, this has been vetted. Now, listen to me. Space has a distinct smell. That smell is a bouquet of diesel fumes, gunpowder, and barbecue. The aroma is produced by dying stars. And that's your Fader fact. Tonight, very special guest Chance Gardner is going to be with us at the bottom of the hour to talk about Magical Egypt, the secrets of Magical Egypt, and the online symposium that they are doing for the next 2 weeks. And, of course, Grand Bonnet guitarist Kurt James is in the batter's box. Tomorrow night, new 20 and back insider Jason Rice is going to be here. Thursday night is another Fader night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom Live. And now I would like to welcome to Fade to Black for the first time, guitarist Kurt James. Kurt, good evening, man. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm talking to you, man. It doesn't get any better than that. And before we get off and start talking about, going off and talking about guitars, which is my favorite thing. By the way, I got a 2008 Les Paul Standard Honeyburst. I just got it. It's hanging behind me. It's
sweet.
It's insane. And I'm not a Les Paul guy, but I saw this and I had to. It's just one of those things I had to have. It's hanging on the wall. But, man, it's a beautiful guitar. I'm a Strat guy. You're a Strat guy. We'll talk Strats in a second. You call yourself – now, I want everybody to know, Graham has been on this show in the past, and, he's a great guy and one of the great singers out there. But you reached out to me, and it was a great email, by the way, but – you signed the email. Kurt, I'm going to throw you under the bus right now for everybody.
Okay.
You signed the email, the paranormal guitar player.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
Yeah, and now let's go right there, man. You are a fan of the show and Coast to Coast and Fade to Black, and you're always listening. You were over in England. You guys were on a European tour, and you are writing me, dude, I'm about to go check out Rendlesham Forest. And I'm going to send you a report. By the way, you never sent me pictures. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you more about that.
But you are fully engaged in this community, aren't you?
Yeah, completely. And I was just thinking about it, and I just came to my mind that my father bought the book Chariots of the Gods. When I first came out, I was like this little kid, and I see this book, and I look at all the pictures, and I'm completely fascinated. And then when the movie came out, I remember he took me to see the movie. So I've been into it, since childhood.
I did the same thing. My mom did the same thing. Chariots of the Gods, the book and the movie. When it came out, I mean, it was a long time ago, and I think for a lot of us, Kurt, you and I share the very same story with our generation. I've heard it over and over again. My mom, my dad, gave me Chariots of the Gods. And I've talked to Eric about that, Eric Von Daniken, about how many lives he changed with that book, and if he was aware of that. But absolutely, you and I would not have connected. See, that's a strange thing. You and I were talking the other day, and you and I have all of the same friends, right? All of the same circles.
Like 90% of the people we know are the same people.
Right. And we have never met. Well, we may have, but we don't remember it. But it's UFOs and Eric Von Daniken that brought you on to Fade to Black. That's pretty trippy. It's pretty trippy.
There was another book called UFOs Here and Now.
Yep.
That I picked up, and I would go to the library and just anything related to Egyptology or UFOs, or there's a whole range of topics that I'm extremely interested in, like Egyptology and astrophysics, and Cosmos was big at my house. That had to be on.
Yeah, all of and that's what I really enjoy about this community and doing this show, is that we can talk about all of these things, whether it's Egypt or the pyramids or UFOs or ghosts and the paranormal and physics and stars and space and Carl Sagan and guitar, right? I can do all of that.
That's what makes it perfect. That ties the whole thing together, right?
Have you ever seen anything strange in the sky?
I have. And that was another thing that I wanted to elaborate on and kind of see if other people feel the same way. It's like when you see something, it's so overwhelming that the next day you can talk to the person you were with and it's like, was that real? Did we really see that?
I know.
Or was that a dream? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, what have you seen?
Well, I swear I saw a one of those hovering big black giant things with lights around the perimeter, kind of maybe triangular or semi-rectangular.
And where was this? When was it?
It must have been about 20 years ago in Orange County, California.
And were you with anybody?
Well, that's where the memory starts, playing tricks with you, because I think anything that overwhelming is hard to believe, and your brain kind of like doesn't know how to process that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, it's like you're going, man, did that really? No way, man. I was just, must have been something I didn't really see.
Okay, I'm gonna flip you out really quick. Neil Turbin. Okay. Neil Turbin, right? Now, I've known Neil.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, right? He was your singer for a while. Neil, who I've known for, I don't even know how long I've known Neil. He came on the show and told this amazing story about this UFO that followed him up the 405 freeway. And, Doug Aldrich on this show, coming back from Vegas, right? The Rock Vault. He said,
Mm-hmm.
he said every time he drives back from Vegas on the 15, he always sees a UFO. Graham Bonnet on this show, right? These are all friends of ours, right? Graham Bonnet had his famous sighting out off of Malibu and wrote, what's that song that he wrote?
Skyfire.
Yeah.
Skyfire.
Yeah. And it's just a really strange thing when it comes to, for me, musicians and ET. I think it has to do with the artistic sensibility, the open mind, the creativeness, but I think it allows things to happen. And I firmly believe that.
Well, it makes sense to me,
The and the other part is when I started this show, Kurt, I thought to myself, if I just be me and I talk about the things that I love and the things that interest me, I'm going to attract an audience that is right there. And as soon as I talk about guitars, my Twitter feed or my email fills up with all of the audience's guitars, or it just doesn't matter, and whether I'm talking about Dimebag Darrell or Egypt or the Great Pyramid, everybody is into the same things, and that's what I really enjoy. So let's talk about you for a second. Today, you guys are premiering a world premiere of your new video, Long Island Tea. What is it like playing for Graham Bonnet, who has the history of only having the finest shredders in his band? You're up there in the same class of all of those guitar players, but does that add pressure?
Well, that's a great question. The pressure is there, obviously. I mean, that's a given. But it's how you handle it and how you feel inside, Graham makes it very easy to feel comfortable around him. I've worked with a lot of people, a lot of great singers, but Graham has this incredible gift of just, making you feel at home, making you feel like you belong. And that makes such a big difference. You know what I mean?
And for you, do you guys go back and do things like, Rainbow Tunes and Lost in Hollywood, Alcatraz stuff, or are you doing only Graham Bonnet tunes?
Oh, yes. We're actually have been doing Rainbow and MSG and Alcatraz. And in fact, this latest tour is the 35-year anniversary of No Parole from Rock and Roll. So we're doing the entire Alcatraz record that featured Jimmy Waldo and Yngwie Malmsteen, Jan Uvina, Gary Shea, and Graham Bonnet. It's a great record. I recommend it to anybody I'm sure most people have been, heard it, but it's one of the best, guitar records and just musical and lyrics. You see, the thing about Graham is he's not just a good screamer. He's like the thinking man's lyricist in metal music. It's amazing.
He is so melodic. I remember sitting with him discussing the old days, older stuff, and he was like, "Man, if I had my druthers, the rock and roll stuff is great, man. But man, I like Detroit. I like R&B." And that's really the truth. And he's got that whole melodic sensibility behind him. So when Rainbow came and snatched him up, I don't even think Richie at that time appreciated the melodic, because they got him in because he was this had this beautiful rock and roll voice, but he had that sensibility of harmony and melody that backed him up, which made all of those songs so singable, right? You know what I mean? Those choruses were huge.
Of course. Yeah, of course. And watching him, do his thing and working with him in the studio, it's just amazing because he's like an orchestra. When he sings, not only is he thinking about, the lead vocal, but he's got all this really incredible harmony that he loves to work with, So that's something, if you really pay attention to his music, it's there.
Now, it's
usually always there.
And how about you? Are you able to be the Kurt James that you want to be in the Graham Bonnet Band?
This goes way back. I was in Steeler, right after Yngwie Malmsteen, and then when I met Yngwie, we became, really good friends right away. And when he left Alcatraz, I go, man, that's where I want to be. But due to circumstances beyond my control, I never really got introduced properly to the organization. And 35 years later, here I am, happier than a pig. And you know what? I mean, this is just perfect for me.
You guys are in the middle of a tour right now, and where are you playing, like, tomorrow night? Where are you off to?
We're going up to Seattle. It's a place called El Corazon. It's right in the heart of Seattle, and it's a great place to play from what I hear. I've never been there before, but looking forward to it. That would be tomorrow night, yeah.
And so you're coming through California. You've got a bunch of dates here. You just played the Viper Room, which I missed, but you're coming back through California. You just got back from Europe. It's pretty much back-to-back dates with Graham.
Yeah, actually, we're stopping in Las Vegas.
Oh, you're playing Vamped. That's right. You're playing the Count's place.
That's right. So we're going to hit that, and then we're playing this really quaint, amazing little place up in the upper desert.
In Apple
Hilltop,
Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, Apple Valley, Hilltop Inn and Tavern, and they have accommodations there for anybody that, gets too happy to drive back home. And then that would be, after that, is San Diego. Yeah, Brick by Brick is a famous place in San Diego.
Yeah, that's an amazing. I'm going to just let the audience know. I'm going to try to talk Rita into a road trip and head up to Apple Valley next Friday night to come and see you guys play. I can't believe I missed the Viper Room. But what do you? I just want to do a quick gear rundown before we run out of time. This is for me.
Yeah,
I know that you're a Strat guy. What's your main Strat?
Well, right now, the one that seems to work the best is actually one that I've had for over 20 years, maybe 25 years. And it's a 77 maple neck on a 75 ash body. It's very heavy. And these were just parts that were, back in the day, you look in the recycler and there'd be a neck for $70 or a body for $50, whatever. And this was just stuff that I just threw together on a lark. And when I played it at rehearsal, it was just like, oh my God, man, this thing stays in tune, sounds huge. It's like the one. So that's my main one. It's the yellow, kind of like a cream yellow scallop neck, maple neck Strat. That's amazing.
You scallop your necks. Okay.
Yeah, I don't always play scallop necks. I believe that the wood sounds better than air if you do the math there, you know that. So if you take away too much wood, you're losing some of the tone, you know. So if it ain't broke, I don't fix it. I mean, if I can play it and it's not scalloped and it works, then I leave it alone. But if certain guitars, just the frets are too small or whatever, you got to scallop them. You know?
And what's your what amps are you using?
Well, I've been a big fan of Marshall amplification, and you know, I grew up in actually I graduated from South Pasadena High School. So when I was growing up, you know, Eddie Van Halen was the guy in town, and they shoved, you know, flyers in our lockers, and you know, we'd go up and see him at parties and at the Pasadena Civic. Anyway, you know, so the Plexi, super lead Plexis from like 67, 8, and 69, they're like the holy grail for us, you know, Pasadena boys.
That's right.
So I'm using a 69 Plexi that just sounds amazing, and I love it. So that's my main amp.
I thought you were going to tell me it has a Jose mod as well.
Actually, you know, Jose maintained his amps, but he never had an extra preamp gain or any of that stuff. You know, it was just a good sounding amp.
That's right. That's right. And what are you using for pedals?
Well, actually, right now I've customized a couple of my own pedals. One's called a Phase 91.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, right. You know, and then the other is off the gray DoD Overdrive 250, but it's just a little bit more clear sounding, so it sounds a little more natural. But I do have all the original Phase 90s and gray DoDs, all that stuff.
So you're using a single channel Marshall and a couple of pedals and a Strat, and you're good to go. That's it, man. That's it.
Yeah, other than that, the tone. Actually, the more crap you put in front of the amp, the worse it sounds.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. For me, straight, unless you've got a crybaby down there or a Phase 90, right? But other than that, straight hard line to the amp, man, with a little verb, and you're good to go. And that's always the best tone. The louder, the better. But that's me. Kurt, I can't wait to see you guys next Friday here in Southern California in Apple Valley. But all my best to everybody in the band. The video is great. The new album is great. The tour's been going great. And I just wish you guys the best. Safe travels out there. And then we'll talk some UFOs next Friday night.
You got it. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you, Kurt. Kurt James. Yeah, thank you so much, Kurt. Everybody can go to thegrahambonnetband.com, and it's right there. Full tour schedule is up. The new video was just released. It's a great website. Everything is there, and you can also follow The Graham Bonnet on Twitter. And I just found out right before the show, I didn't even know this, but Kurt is not on Twitter. But you can definitely follow everything right there at The Graham Bonnet on Twitter. I'm going to take a quick break. Thank you, Kurt. You guys have safe travels. We'll see you next Friday right here in Southern California. I'll be right back with our guest, Chance Gardner. Kurt James, Shredder. I'll be right back.
This is Nicole Church, daughter of you-know-who, and you're listening to Fade to Black on JimmyChurchRadio.com and the Game Changer Network.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Yes, River Moon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can get our podcast for just $2 per month. All you have to do is click on the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com.
Times are changing. The circus of politics, healthcare's low standards and high prices, and let's not forget food quality. What to do? Arm yourself with Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. In a world of chemical imbalance and poor air and water quality, it's time you make a move. Log on to getthetea.com and stock up on organic non-GMO supplements. Don't forget the tea. Cleansing your body never felt so good. And we have a brand new tea called Takedown Tea, which helps support healthy glucose. All natural body support so you can be at your best, naturally. All you have to do is log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. We're not a fad that comes and goes. We are the real deal. Join us and armor up. Getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Changing America's health one tea bag at a time.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, The Planet.
Do you want to lose weight but have no idea where to begin? The Fast Start Diet, a 3-day weight loss plan, is the answer. 3 days of nutritionally balanced, calorie-restricted meals delivered right to your door. No shopping, no measuring, and no cooking. Everything is prepared for you and ready to eat at home or on the go. The Fast Start Diet has all the amazing benefits of intermittent fasting without starving. We've helped thousands of people who have struggled to reach their weight loss goals. Isn't it time we helped you? With the Fast Start Diet, you'll lose weight and feel great.
Find Fast Start Diet on Amazon or go to faststartdiet.com and use promo code TALK to get 10% off your first box. And as a special bonus, Fast Start will include their #1 rated Lipo-3 appetite suppressant spray free with your order. This is Jimmy Church. And whatever your diet plans are, do what I did. Go to faststartdiet.com.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What a great week on Fade to Black. Unbelievable. And tonight, Chance Gardner is here. Tomorrow night, Jason Rice, the new 20 back insider, is going to join us. Thursday night's another Fader night. Open lines with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom Live. Tonight, though, it's Chance. And we're going to talk about the Magical Egypt Online Symposium that is going on right now, October 1st through October 11th. Almost 2 straight weeks of the best guests, including Laird Scranton. Last night, they had Rick Strassman on, Chris Dunn, Ed Nightingale, so many more. We're going to talk about all of that. And, of course, Chance is a multi-award winning graphic designer, 3D animator, cinematographer, editor, 20-year career producing motion graphics and on-air promo for major TV networks, including 20th Century Fox, Paramount Studios, NBC Universal. And he retired from television in 2001 to make documentaries. And that includes, of course, Magical Egypt 1 and 2 with John Anthony West. And let's just get straight to it. Chance, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Jimmy, I am fantastic, and I'm super excited to be here because people keep telling me I have a face for radio.
Yeah,
people
you
say
do.
With a face like that, you should do radio.
You know, I got to see you on video about a half hour ago, and I'm gonna concur, my friend. I'm gonna concur. Let's get straight to it. There are lots to talk about tonight. And
one of the things that I want to just right off the bat, one of the important guests that you forgot to mention is the iconic Jimmy Church is joining me tomorrow night. You may know Jimmy from such shows as Fade to Black and the iconic Art Bell's grandfather of all cool radio, the Coast to Coast show. Jimmy and I are going to there's going to be a big kind of a kickoff. We're doing a 3-hour extravaganza tomorrow night, and the symposium lies before us. I'm so excited, Jimmy, because we have such a collection of just the pinnacle of thinkers and researchers, and blowing open this this subject of ancient Egypt and what it means to us.
Yes, and the idea behind this, that is a lot of work to do a 2-week conference. I mean, that's insane. And you've put together, you know what? Actually, let's take the time. Let's go down this list. I mean, you know, Laird Scranton, Rick Strassman, to kick things off, right? Of course, you and I. But incredible. So let's talk about why. I mean, Laird is obvious, but Rick, what a great idea.
Rick Strassman was in the original Magical Egypt, and not only is he just a fascinating person in his own right, and he was friends with Terence McKenna, who I just absolutely love, but Rick Strassman is one of those examples of what Magical Egypt is about, where this one branch of the humanities has been dictating what we believe about ancient Egypt for, you know, most of modern civilization. And their story now is the same as it was back in the 50s, whereas a lot of as the rest of the world keeps moving on, science keeps perfecting itself. And because of Magical Egypt and because of your show and because of things that are pointing to the mystery of Egypt, more and more scientists are coming online, mathematicians and engineers and chemists, psychologists, astronomers, every single branch of science. As time goes by, science is getting to the place where they're starting to recognize things from ancient Egypt. And the collective voice of Magical Egypt, and really the collective voice that Egypt expresses itself in, it's starting to turn, and it's starting to become apparent that what we've thought of as the message of ancient Egypt, that was kind of a proto-religious, superstitious thing about gods and whatnot, is really more correctly thought of as a misunderstood science. And because, you know, in the 1900s and the 1800s, when we were trying to understand Egypt, you know, science was in a certain place, and there was some things we could recognize, and so much of it we absolutely couldn't recognize. But as science progresses and things like string theory and subatomic physics become more understood, people like Laird can point back at the Dogon and the ancient Egyptians, who had this iconic message that perfectly described what we know now as subatomic physics. Where Rick Strassman comes in really is so relevant to this is most of Egyptology has this idea that the Egyptians didn't know what the brain was for. And we all know from, you know, if you've ever seen Hindu or Tibetan or Buddhist art, those beautiful Buddhist temples, the beautiful statues, and Mayan, South American Aztec art, there's this huge prominence, a prominent pointing to the third eye, this place that the Hindus call the Bindi, you know, and I think we all at this point know what the third eye is. Rick Strassman is not only a psychologist, but he is a psychiatrist, and a fantastic doctor. Rick was one of the breakthrough people that helped us understand the little bit that we do understand about the pineal gland, which is the pineal gland, pituitary, and thalamus all taken together are this seat of consciousness known as the third eye, or just known as the mind's eye in the West. Rick was the last person that was given official permission to test DMT, this incredibly strong psychedelic, on human subjects. And this almost never happens because the government, as soon as LSD came out and as soon as entheogens became widely recognized, the government just absolutely clamped down. Not only can people not do these things recreationally, but science wasn't even allowed to explore the effects of DMT on the pineal gland. And so I brought Rick into the show to demonstrate another example of how modern science points to this thing that the ancients used to make a really big deal about, but the modern world didn't understand. So the pineal gland is the seat of consciousness, and more particularly what your brain does when you're on DMT or hallucinogens. It tells us something really important about consciousness. As you know, modern science really is one of the few things we don't understand in the modern world is what the hell is that? What is consciousness? And, we still don't really even know what the pineal gland does except produce this naturally occurring, incredibly powerful psychedelic. And people on this psychedelic frequently report, or in fact, the common experience in DMT is that people who do this DMT trip, suddenly you're not in your body anymore. Your consciousness is disconnected from your body. And you go to these places that seem to be actually real, objective places that exist somewhere, not in our regular space. But everyone who's done DMT and, the whole 60s culture, it's a fairly common idea that these entheogens disconnect your consciousness from your body and allow you to interact with intelligences and just these weird things that genuinely seem to be outside of us.
Well, another dimension, a parallel world.
Yeah, or a different frequency, like on your television.
Right.
Your television doesn't ever change the space it's in, but it changes the frequency that it tunes into. And so what some people think is that this actually changes the frequency that your brain tunes into, which is, it's a very exciting thing. And the tendency of modern science is to be very reductionist and material. And they say that consciousness is sort of just this byproduct of how complex your brain is. Whereas the ancient model, and in ancient Egypt, they had literally the inverse, that consciousness is the only thing that there is, and that consciousness and light slowed down and consolidated form the basis of everything. And it's a huge contention, and it really has much wider, it has theological ramifications, it has psychological ramifications. But the Egyptians, in so many ways, seem to be way, way ahead of us. And only just now, as science is starting to understand the role of the pineal gland and what happens in the hallucinogenic process, we are starting to understand now why Egypt had such a fanaticism for the third eye area and for this idea of talking to gods and having spiritual things and consulting with intelligences that are much smarter than you, and in some cases intelligences that seem to be outside of the flow of regular time.
Let me jump in. I'm going to jump in real quick.
Go.
The presentation that you did on the pineal gland in Magical Egypt 2, now it's your fault. I cannot help but see the pineal gland every time I see the Eye of Ra, which I have all over the studio. I'm holding them up to the cameras right now. Some of the stuff that I have around here, and yeah, it's the Eye of Ra, right? But not to me anymore. It's the pineal gland.
Yeah.
And that's it. And you're responsible for that. It's an incredible presentation that you do on it. You really you present a really good case and argument for this.
There's so much science in Egypt, and I've always thought it was an extremely strange thing that something so important to all of us, is so important to humanity, and such a big part of our identity is ancient Egypt, that the only people who are allowed to make pronouncements about it are Orthodox Egyptologists and historians, when in fact it's sort of like finding a car and then taking a car to a veterinarian and asking them what they think. That in a huge way, you don't need Egyptologists. You need mathematicians, you need engineers, you need stoneworkers, psychologists, music, acoustic experts. But what I found was I had a certain core expertise and a certain amount of credibility in my field. I'm coming up on 30 years of doing what I do, and artists, it turns out, when artists look at Egypt, when scientists and artists look at Egypt, and most importantly, when artists and scientists team together to look at Egypt, the picture that you see is almost an entirely different picture than the picture of Egypt that we learned about in school. It's a much more sophisticated place. And most important of all is most of what you hear about ancient Egypt doesn't pass the so what test. What's in it for me? Why would I care about this? That most Orthodox Egyptology has to do with these really abstract things that have nothing to do with us. When you actually understand the messages that the temples and the statuary and the papyri and all the funerary texts, when you actually understand the message of ancient Egypt, it's not religious. It's a scientific message, but it happens to be a scientific message that focuses specifically on an area of science that pisses off modern scientists. It's a science of consciousness.
And I'll tell you, the other great part about it is ancient Egyptian art, whether it's sarcophagus or wall or sculpt, it doesn't matter. It's easy to look at. Right. And so when you go back to like the Roaring 20s, right, where Egypt was everywhere in the United States, in the clothes and the furniture and whatever it was there because it looked cool. Right. And so that accessibility to everybody, it was pleasing to look at. You didn't have to convince somebody that it was cool artwork. And
you hit on one of the most important parts of ancient Egypt. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
And then you got into the science of it, and then you got into the history and so forth. But you were drawn to it naturally and didn't know why.
As a 5-year-old, I was drawn to it. There are aesthetics. We use the word aesthetics. Aesthetics is the science of studying the artistic expressions of previous cultures. And so my entry to Egypt was as an artist. I saw this art and it is beautiful. And I would make the case that there's never been a civilization before or since, possibly Salvador Dali, but very few others, who really ever came close to the intensity of the beauty. And because it was my job for so long, I worked at a network. I won't say which one. It's not one of the noble ones. There are no noble networks, but I worked at this network. And I pushed the limits of art to the point where if you understand art enough and you understand psychology and physiology, there are certain colors that produce actual physiological responses in us. And what's even stranger, well, the thing that most people can identify with is if I go to a piano and I play a third and a fifth and a seventh, the proportion between those notes is pleasant to us. If I play a fourth and a sixth and a something, it's awful and it makes you cringe and it makes you want to leave the room. So that's a really quick example that everyone can relate to about how relationships, proportional relationships between things are pleasant or unpleasant. So a lot of people know about the Fibonacci series and this organic geometry. Graphic designers will know about the Fibonacci series and the golden section because there seems to be these certain divisions of space and proportions that affect our nervous system. And we have this, it's almost like we fall in love with it. An example I use a lot is, you know how when you see a baby, even if you don't like kids, if you see a baby or if you see a little baby shirt or little baby shoes, they're just like whoever you are, they're just adorable. You have to stop for a minute and go, oh my God, how adorable is that?
Right.
And there's something we're hardwired to, that the proportion of the eyes and the size of the head to the body, which is part of the reason why the whole gray aliens thing is so sticky in our psyche, because they have that proportion that babies have, bigger head and littler body. And we're literally wired to respond to that with emotion, like falling in love. Love at first sight is a huge example of this, that nobody can explain why we respond the way we do. As the Magical Egypt project continued and as we started understanding the real role of art in the past, it was used to transmit this information, but the information was couched in beauty. And it's like putting a spoonful of sugar in aspirin or mixing vodka with grape juice or something. It's this intensely dense technical information, but it's relayed through this medium that is pure beauty. And not only is it just pleasant to look at, but the way our brain is structured and the way we store information and the way we process information, Egypt was perfectly it was one of those examples of technology that's gotten so far that it doesn't seem like technology. It seems like magic, that they understood art and the psyche so well that the language they used was a visual language of hieroglyphs, but also part of their language was symbolism, which is a very right-brain thing. It's all about analogies and connection. And if I show you a bird, it means flight and it means the volatile. And so because of our right brain and this dense web of associations and meanings we have, Egypt can transmit this science through the medium of art. And as I'd said, this is the most important branch of science, and it's the most underdeveloped in the modern world. This science that explains why we think of ourselves as individuals. Why am I only seeing out of my eyes? Why do I only hear my own thoughts? Is there consciousness outside of us that we can tap into, which is what the whole psychedelic conversation raises. And so as we've uncovered more and more of Egypt, what we'd realized is that this isn't proto-religion. This is like a magic mirror that holds itself up to you and shows you the parts of yourself that are the most important, first of all, and things you can't see. What's the structure of your psyche? The structure of the psyche seems to very much parallel the physical structure of the brain. So when you see things like the temple pylon that shows you where the Egyptian pylon acts like a template, where if you hold that in your mind, hold the picture of the temple, or if you can do it on computer, you take an outline of the pylon, put it directly over the human brain, and you'll find that all the articulations of the architecture show you exactly where the important parts of the brain are. And that most iconic thing in Egyptian architecture, that beautiful door, the big door with the fluted top and the winged disc lands exactly at the place of the third eye, the pineal, pituitary, and thalamus. And the winged disc itself is this kind of instruction about unity. You know, the two wings represent the two hemispheres of the brain in this case, and then the center sun symbol. You know what I'm talking about, the winged disc.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is itself not only a symbol, but a schematic, an instruction about how to achieve this state of consciousness that is expressed everywhere in Egypt. You know how often people, when they see Egypt, when John West was on Joe Rogan, the first question Joe Rogan asked John was, how were they so smart? Why were they so smart? And it turns out they left a roadmap in the art telling us how to achieve this state of consciousness. And because it's been so misunderstood and misrepresented, and, you know, there's a lot of money in and spirituality, and so we never did get the truth about that. And it's operative. It's something we can use. It's not just a theoretical idea. Sorry about that.
Well, no, that's okay, because when we talk about the science of it and some of the revelations coming out of Giza right now, you've got Chris Dunn on Thursday, and Chris's approach to the Great Pyramid seemed revolutionary and almost too far outside of the box. Now science is coming right behind Chris and propping him up, and you've got him on Thursday.
Chris is amazing. I just locked in with him this week figuring out what to talk about. And so, first of all, as you'd said, Christopher Dunn is most widely known for his idea that the pyramid is actually a massive electrical power plant. There are a number of engineers and just, you know, weird brainiacs that I know here that are fascinated with him because it actually works. This thing that he proposed, the pyramid, because of its location over the aquifers and the tides, create this ambient electricity, and literally very similar to the power plant that Nikola Tesla tried to build, or he was in the process of building, I think, when he died. Also over the top of a coastline where water would come in and go and take advantage of that natural electricity. But Christopher Dunn, I really hit it off with him, first of all, because he and I have so many similarities. He's a machinist and an engineer, and so he works through the computer in an interface that's very much like mine. If you're a computer animator, you work with top view, side view, well, the axis is x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. Christopher, in addition to this Great Pyramid theory, which was his first offering, I've found the stuff he's done later is every bit as important, if not more so, that he's really speaking my language now, because his new book, which is right now available, is all about this analysis of the statuary and the stonework. I come to this, you know, full of symbols and speaking the language of art. I've never I barely know how to use a hammer. I'm not much of a machinist. I don't know things like that. But Christopher is one of those guys that actually has to take a block of stone and cut it down into shapes. He does metalworking in stone. And so he has this extremely pragmatic knowledge of what's necessary to accomplish some of the statuary in Egypt. And one of the things that impressed me, he perfectly proved, this is the essence of good science, by the way, everybody in Orthodox Egyptology will continue to insist that the tools that Egypt had available to them were these stone balls and copper chisels. And, people say they hadn't even invented the wheel yet. But Christopher Dunn shows, in one example, there's a statue, the statue of Ramses in Luxor. There's statues of them all over. They're massive. They're absolutely gigantic. They are I had an appreciation for this because I've tried to do this myself. When you want to scan something or you want to create something on a computer, you have to take a very special kind of photograph called an isometric photograph or an orthographic photograph that removes all of the depth of field and all the vanishing points. And it's just this flat, accurate picture of the outline of something. So he took all of these engineering photographs of the statuary and he put them in the computer for analysis. And he was just trying to figure out what tools were used, or was this possible if you carve things by hand. And what he found was if you take a mirror and hold it down the central axis of the statue, the left side of the statue matched the right side exactly.
Exactly. The cheeks, the eyebrows, the eyes, the nose, the lips, the chin. His presentation on that is a game changer.
It is actually a game changer, and all by itself peels away one of those layers of smugness from Egyptology that absolutely doesn't make sense. It's one of the most ridiculous things in Egyptology that these people accomplished all of that only with stone chisels.
And
clearly
granite.
They had tools that we just don't understand.
Red granite, and his presentation on that of the arcs, the arches, the spheres, and how it had to. It wasn't somebody just attacking that with a stone hammer, going, okay, I'm going to create this. That is clearly not the case.
And he said an interesting thing that I never really talked about. Another thing about engineering is that you have different tolerances. Christopher's all about precision.
That's right.
And you have different tolerances. So if you're making a scarecrow, you don't need millimeter precision on this scarecrow. If you're making a work of art, it doesn't matter that these things are symmetrical. And in fact, most organic things aren't symmetrical. But these statues don't have, according to our understanding of what these statues were for, they don't have to be perfect like this, but they are built to this precision that is damn near impossible with the height of technology right now. Robert Bauval talks a lot about the size of the stones and how modern day cranes literally would have trouble lifting, much less, accurately placing these stones. Christopher's so hands-on. He's all about the actual machining and how do you get a stone to do this. He says in his book, he spent his life running his hands over surfaces to check for perfections. And very much like that whole interesting conversation about the crystal skulls, when you look microscopically at these surfaces, there are no chisel marks. This looks like it was machine made, although, nobody's ever found any machines. So it must be some kind of technology we don't understand. But that's just absolutely fascinating to me. And it is literally the essence and the heart of what Magical Egypt is trying to do, is reclaim this subject that belongs to all of us out of the clutching hands of this one obscure branch, it's obscure and really relatively insular branch of the humanities that are telling everyone else, no, you can't have a say in what this is. It's almost surreal. It's like a little boy taking his basketball home so no one else can play. And I saw John West, this man that I love and who is my, in many ways, my mentor and father. He spent his whole life banging his head against this wall. And he genuinely thought one day Egyptology would say, you're right, we're wrong. Everything we said was wrong. It's never going to happen. So it occurred to me that if we change the venue, change the arena of combat, take it away from the historical perspective, and let's look at it through the eyes of art. Let's look at it through the eyes of science. And it's a different place than we were told. And in specifically the most exciting way, that there's something there for us. This is a birthright for us. And it tells you something about yourself that I bet you didn't know. And
well, when we come back,
sort of answers that question, what are we here for?
Right. And when we come back, I want to talk about Ed Nightingale. And Ed... and I've had some of the most amazing guests on this show to talk about Egypt. Ed was one of those conversations that absolutely changed my paradigm, my worldview. Absolutely incredible. One of the most humble guys out there, too, as well. We'll discuss that because we already touched upon the Fibonacci sequence. Well, that's what we're going to do next. We're going to talk about Ed Nightingale. The Magical Egypt Symposium is going on right now. We put up all of the links for it in Twitter. You can go and do that. You can also go to magicalegypt.com. Our guest tonight, Chance Gardner. I'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA Digital Broadcast Station.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
Yes.
We are also Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
Reclaim your active lifestyle with Angioprim. Angioprim is the original liquid oral chelation supplement. Chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in your veins and arteries that can cause blockages. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. Find out more. Go to angioprim.com. Talk to a trained consultant by calling Angioprim toll-free 877-882-7221.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can become an official Fadernaut by just going to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hey, it's Grace. Can we talk about something serious for a minute? Your age. Getting old has its perks. But remember, being a few years younger, you know, your hair was thicker, you didn't have so many wrinkles, that extra weight wasn't haunting you, and you just felt better. Well, we can't turn back the clocks and go back 10 or 15 years, but you can start feeling and looking 10 or 15 years younger with Nature's Youth RSF. It's a doctor-formulated daily supplement that helps your body maintain its peak performance and fight the aging process. Imagine sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better. See how Nature's Youth RSF has helped thousands of people just like you at nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com. Imagine how it will feel when your family and friends are asking you what you did to look so good. Your secret will be Nature's Youth RSF. It's time to start looking better and feeling better. Learn more and order your Nature's Youth RSF at nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com.
Hello, this is Serena Wright Taylor from Conscious Life Expo, and you're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, who holds the Lucky Pony record for the best astrological chart since 1963. True story.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, the one and only Chance Gardner, is here. It's got the most amazing symposium going on for the next 2 weeks, the Magical Egypt Online Symposium. We've got the links up for it in Twitter and also over at jimmychurchradio.com. Now, Chance, this is before we get to Ed Nightingale. You and I will be doing our thing tomorrow. And I just received, I can't talk about it. I can allude to it, but I have to wait until the paper is published. But I was sent the paper in advance. But in this white paper, there now appears to be 8 additional chambers inside of the Great Pyramid. Now,
holy crap!
Now, I can't jump ahead and get to specifics here, but we do have the new chamber that has been talked about and released. We know about that, and this is one of the things that blows my mind. That the other 2 pyramids there, and Menkaure, those Egyptologists want us to believe that there's nothing inside of them.
Yeah.
Okay, I call BS there. There is absolutely no way that those are just solid, right? I mean, just stop with that. But when we look at the Great Pyramid, this is what I am struck with, and I'm going to take this further tomorrow with you, is not old, not 10,000 years old. I'm talking about immortal, right? I just think that it is so phenomenally old. And the reason why I come to this conclusion is that when we look across the Nile at Cairo, which has been leveled over time repeatedly with earthquakes and weathering and stuff. That is what, but yet the pyramid is there unchanged. But also look at Rome. Rome before it was a city at 400 BC was mud huts. And you can see the degradation over time with Rome. Look at Greece. Look at any other megalithic site around the world, save for Göbekli Tepe, and that was deliberately buried. But everything else has degraded. Simple, and even the pyramids around the Great Pyramid, all of the other sites around ancient Egypt, everything has degraded over time. Not the Great Pyramid. And I need clarification on that. And Egyptology is not going to give that to me. I see something that is immortal. I can't think of another word, but something so majestic that has absolutely sat there unchanged forever.
Laird's wife, Risa, one time when I was at Laird's place in New York, she said this thing, and she said it, I don't know if she was joking or not, but it never left my head. She said the only thing that would really explain the Great Pyramid is time travel, that at some moment in the future, maybe the last moment before humanity got killed somehow, we all came back in time to a place before, human habitation, and we built this thing. It's almost impossible to explain unless it's always been there, unless the dinosaurs built it. I don't actually believe that was the case.
I'm totally with Risa on that. I'm totally with her. I see something that is ageless.
Yeah.
That's it. That's there. When somebody comes up and some educated, somebody that has got letters after their name, and they want to tell me, well, it's 2600 BC, and it's fine. No, dude, you do not know, or dudette. You don't know. Don't tell me that you know, because you don't. There is nothing that you can give to me as evidence of dating of the Great Pyramid or of the Sphinx or anything else. I'm sorry about that. You were not there. You weren't, and you look at when you look at the family's pyramids along the side of the Great Pyramid, Khufu, Khafre, whatever you want to say, whoever's in there, wife, son, daughter, aunt, great uncle, whatever, those things are crumbling piles of stone. And that was them trying to replicate what was there. That's it, and it didn't. Those didn't stand the test of time. Right, and so you just that's it. That's where I'm at. I'm going to go further with this tomorrow with everybody, but that's that. I see immortality.
It is one of the most interesting things in the world, and anybody who's been to Egypt, when you stand face to face and look at those stones, you put your hands on those stones, those things are geological. Those are old in geological terms, not sociological terms, that the ruins there. And the most crazy thing that nobody acknowledges, but that if you go there and if you spend time there, the oldest things from the first dynasty of ancient Egypt were built over the top of things that were incredibly old when they were, and speaking, Göbekli Tepe has been sort of on cotton balls, and so it preserved really well. These things were so old and so exposed, seemingly thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years before the Egyptians rebuilt, the exploded pyramid and the red pyramid, less famous pyramids, but really cool ones. They're built over the top of things that were already incredibly old ruins. And the Valley Temple as well. If people have been to the Sphinx, there's two places in Egypt that have architecture that's like Stonehenge. It's nothing like Egyptian architecture. One is the Osirion in Abydos, and one is the Valley Temple that's right next to the Sphinx. So everybody goes in and sees this thing. And there are places on the John West tour, I believe you've been on the John West tour as well, you probably remember this, when he takes you to a corner and he shows you this stonework, which is beautiful red granite stone. And it doesn't come to a corner. It's actually curved. It's curved, which is just, how would you even do that? The inside of a room doesn't have sharp corners. It has curved corners, and this living stone, actually bends. But the point I'm getting to is that there's parts where this, I call it modern. It's relatively modern. It's old to us, but this thing was built over something else. And when the stone falls away, you can see the crumbled remains of the stuff that was there underneath it. The same is true with some of the pyramids. And in fact, that massive flat area that is like Cape Canaveral. I mean, it's that big. It's like a launch pad, rocket launch pad, perfectly flat, giant. If the pyramid weren't even there, I think we've talked about this before, just the flat engineering of the stone that the pyramid sits on, which clearly had to be there, before the pyramid, that's massive, and it's an engineering feat no one can explain. So you're absolutely correct, and it's one of the first mysteries that jumps out, or the first riddles that jumps out at you when you go to ancient Egypt, that clearly this place is so old that there's no explanation for it. And then suddenly you start bumping up against all the social engineers and people that have some kind of weird vested interest in us not knowing about our past. It's an unusual branch of science, because very few branches of science, there's such active subterfuge. I often talk about Isaac Newton said, I got where I am by standing on the shoulders of giants. And so much of we know about Egypt came to us by standing on the shoulders of idiots that were just completely wrong. And,
right.
You have to unlearn what you know and then go to Egypt, and then it'll start speaking to you.
Yeah, we can talk about the 2.5 million blocks. We can talk about how they did it and be fascinated with that conversation. But it doesn't actually even start there for me. You touched upon one of the most important aspects of the Great Pyramid. That is 13 acres of perfectly leveled stonework was done before the construction of the pyramid.
Yeah.
13 acres. And those stones that the pyramid is built on, each one of those stones weighs more than a car. And they leveled out and prepped that surface, leveled it, and pointed it directly to true north before they ever started building the pyramid. And that is a mind-blowing concept. You need to start there. And I don't know how they did it. And that's why, this is the thing, Chance. we really, really need to sit down and stress this with all of the Egyptologists that are trying to force this issue down our throats. If you want to sit and tell me that this was done at 3000 BC or 2650 or 2700 BC, when nobody had the knowledge of leveling and engineering and architecture, and they didn't have a CAD computer system, they didn't have anything like this.
No lasers.
Nothing. Maybe a square, maybe some type of rudimentary leveling device, maybe, but the rest of the world did not. And they did not have the technology to level 13 acres and know why they had to do it. That's because the knowledge was already there, and it was done long before by somebody else. It wasn't done at 2650 BC. They didn't have that knowledge.
Yep. And its location is exactly at the zero meridian, before we went to Greenwich Mean Time. That's the zero meridian. It's literally the exact center. If you draw diagonals across the landmass of the whole Earth, if you take the Earth and flatten it out and then draw a diagonal through the landmass, the exact center of the landmasses on Earth is where the pyramid is situated.
Now,
how are you going to do that without a satellite? Or without
that's where Ed Nightingale comes in. What a great segue. Okay, well, hold on for a second before I get to Ed. When we talk about Khafre and that the center pyramid, everybody, it's the middle one, that it is solid, that there's nothing in there. Why? What's your opinion? Why nobody over the years hasn't come up and removed stones and looked for an entrance?
Honestly, I have to choose my words carefully here because I don't like offending people, but I think they've known for a really long time. And if you have enough money, I was there one time. I got kicked off the Giza Plateau because the Emperor of Japan was there. And apparently he's more important than I am. If you have a lot of money, you can pay to go see some places that the regular public can't go. And I don't want to say anything bad about any particular person. If you've been to Egypt, there's a different way of doing business there, and they're very poor people. And so you can expect people that are economically depressed to bend the rules a little bit. And Egypt is one of those places where if you have a little money to spread around, there is nothing that is not denied to you. And, we saw it in the States during the OJ trial that if you have enough money, most of the rules don't apply to you. And I genuinely believe that they've known about these things maybe all along, or maybe just in the last 6 years, technology has become available and much more practical to literally see through things. The Great Pyramid was remarkable because there's something about it that we still don't understand. You can't X-ray it. You can't look through it. It's why that Muon group, the Japanese group that did the Muon studies that uncovered that room recently, that was really clever. It's the first time we've ever been able to figure out what material actually goes through the pyramid so that we can check scientifically like you would an X-ray, or an ultrasound or something. So you can't ultrasound it. You can't X-ray it. They do heat studies, and that kind of tells you. But this is just, I couldn't produce evidence of this in a court of law, but if you've been there and if you understand anything that's this important and this closely guarded, and if you understand the nature of the humanities and people having to protect their reputations and so on, it's not above a scientist or somebody. I gotta choose my words again. I don't want to paint with too horrible a brush, but when you're the expert of something and then new evidence comes along to completely invalidate everything you've said, it's kind of a basic human emotion to want to protect your place and to protect your all-knowing persona. And then the other thing, as I said, was if you've got a little bit of money, it's a whole different place in Egypt. You can see things that regular public aren't allowed to go. So I think that one of the things that's remarkable about Egypt and remarkable about this territorialism is that they all know that they're wrong, and there's something about, I don't know if it's government, it's hard not to lapse into conspiracies here, but in China, you can't talk about the pyramids. You literally get executed there's some huge pyramids, 3 pyramids in China that they've grown over with grass and they pretend they're not there. The early conquistadors and early representatives of the Catholic Church were quite fond of destroying indigenous cultures and eliminating their writing. You know, the Mayan codices, the Mayan books were mostly burned, and they were of the devil. And there was this moment, famous moment in history, where one of the conquerors in the in the Crusades, one of the great sultans, he found this just treasure trove of ancient writing. And he said, well, if it's in the Quran, it's redundant. And if it's not in the Quran, it's of the devil. So burn it all. And there has been this systematic scouring of the voice of these ancient people. And to this day, you run into a lot of weird resistance if you start, I'm sure I've told you this, even in Australia, you kind of get in trouble if you start pointing out megalithic ruins. And they're all over the place here, and they're in New Zealand. And I know some friends that actually went to jail for publishing things that just show there was ancient civilizations here. In Australia, it appears as though the Egyptians came here to mine gold. King Tut's face mask has Australian gold, and it has opals, that only occur in Australia, and a couple other things. And there's boomerangs, in the Cairo Museum. And the Aborigines here, of all things. Nobody listens to the Aborigines for some reason here, but they're quite vocal about the fact that ancient Egypt came here, and they were magicians, and they loved the Aborigine people, and they came for the gold. And so there is this institutional resistance, and I don't understand, but, you don't need to understand why a fence is there to bump up against it all the time.
Yeah, I know. I would, if I had control of Giza, I would do two things. One, I would build a giant vacuum cleaner, and I would just suck up the sand for about 50 square miles, right?
Get all the Pepsi cans out of there?
I want to know what's under the sand. That's the first thing. But the second thing I would do is I would get some teams together and some cranes, and I would go and start removing the blocks on Makare and Khafre.
Yeah,
I would start to look for entrances, and if we believe what they are saying, that Makare built it for him and Khafre built the middle pyramid for him, then there must be a king's chamber in each one, right? If we believe what they are saying,
yeah.
And so
how about the idea that they would never think of having a tomb that isn't covered in hieroglyphs and there's no writing, there's nothing Egyptian inside the pyramid?
Well, that's because they were built before hieroglyphics were even a language. That's why. That's why. Now, okay, so you just brought up the meridian, and that's one thing, one of many, that Ed Nightingale presented with the Fibonacci sequence coming off of the crown of the Great Sphinx. And this is the thing, and I want to talk about this before we get to the break. It's one thing when you look at Ed's research just on the Giza Plateau as the Fibonacci unwinds and all of this math starts to surface. But it expands all the way out into the universe, right? Into the Milky Way.
Right.
And you have to ask yourself, Ed's work on this is extraordinary, but then you have to stop and ask yourself, where did the knowledge come from to reach out into the stars like that? I mean, Sirius is obvious and Orion is obvious, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the Milky Way in general, which is way beyond all of this. What do you think about Ed's research when he does this presentation?
Ed's another one of those people like Christopher that when he's through with you, you cannot argue. You can't argue. I mean, as I keep saying, and I don't want to harp on this, but the difference between the humanities and the sciences, you can't have an opinion about math. You can't say, well, in my opinion, 1 and 1 equals 3. The sciences prove themselves. The sciences solve themselves. The nature of science is that you can't say something's true until it proves itself. And when you look at the proofs that Ed and Christopher and all of us in our own way are presenting, if you actually obey the rules of science, you don't end up with something that may be this or maybe that. It demonstrates to you. I know from my study of the art that the Fibonacci Fibonacci, by the way, in case people don't know what that word is if you ever looked at a sunflower or an artichoke, there's that really unique spiral. I think it's a square root of 2 spiral, which doesn't mean anything, but it's this spiral that you see everywhere in nature. And because as things grow, they grow according to this spiral. So you see it in nautilus shells, you see it in sunflower seeds, you see it in the spiraling of galaxies. Literally everything that's alive and organic, if you look hard enough, will express this Fibonacci sequence. And then the other thing, kind of the brother or sister of it, is the golden section, where your whole body is just this bouquet of golden section relationships. And it's another thing that Egyptology denies that the Egyptians knew, but I showed in the very first episode, there's hundreds of examples of perfect Fibonacci progressions and the golden section, the use of the golden section, which is, to your point earlier about why is it so beautiful, everything they do is gridded out beforehand according to the this organic geometry. And that's why we have this involuntary response to it, because we're made of that. And in some way that's hard to articulate, consciousness partakes of that same geometric structure. And so they used geometry on the ground plan as well. And that's why there's just some keys. If you understand the keys to Egypt, it starts talking to you.
I think that Ed's work is as important as anything else out there, both in conventional educational systems and on the fringe, too, as well in our community. You're absolutely right. When Ed is done with you, you can't argue. It is absolutely remarkable, and it all starts at the crown of the Sphinx. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Did you see that movie with Anakin Skywalker? It's called Jumpers. It's kind of a kind of a superficial film, but there was a scene where he was jumping. He was kind of teleporting, and one of the scenes was he teleported onto the head of the Sphinx. It was just this beautiful, beautiful shot, aerial shot.
No, I didn't, but you have a way of segueing right into something. That was well done. Speaking of pop culture, we've only got about a minute left. I watch all of the pop, like Gods of Egypt, right? I'll watch all of these films and go back and look at the symbolism that is there. And I think that more and more Hollywood, these screenwriters and the researchers that go into these films, they study, man. They study it, and it is spot on. I really enjoy it. Stargate is an amazing film, and the opening that opening scene with James Spader, when he's at like the Metropolitan or he's whatever museum he's at, and he's giving the presentation, and he brings up Howard Weiss. Right? Yeah. It's like, wow. Okay, so the thing is, what was great about that was when somebody in the audience raises their hand and says, well, okay, if the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids, who did? And Spader goes, well, I don't know. And everybody gets up and walks out. And I thought that's exactly where we are at with our community today. These are the things that we discuss. I enjoy the way that Hollywood does their research.
It's a subject, and there's this whole thing. Is that in the zeitgeist? Does somebody actually know? That was one of those examples, and you keep seeing them. That this is in the public psyche. We all know this, and everyone is so interested. 5-year-olds and 100-year-olds. There's just something in our collective consciousness that we're all looking to Egypt and waiting for something to happen that's going to change everything. And maybe it's just that the people that are in charge are really happy with the way things are. They're perfectly happy that we're using gasoline and petroleum. They're perfectly happy with, that we have some freedoms, but a lot of things we don't have freedom in. And if you think of the world more as a people farm than as a park where everyone's operating, there's a lot of reasons to keep things the way they are. And so this thing that you hear a lot in the UFO community as well, if you really told the truth about this place, it's going to raise some huge questions about how did they do this without gasoline? How did they do it without engines? And all of a sudden, is there another technology that's clean and naturally occurring that if you knew enough about telluric energy and magnetism and sound, and vibration, there are much more sophisticated sciences that we should have been onto by now. We shouldn't have been doing gasoline after 1900s. It's just a terrible idea, but there's so much money in it that we're never allowed to evolve out of it. And somehow this idea that we used to be so much smarter and didn't need traditional tools, that the only thing I can think of about why it seems so important that we're not allowed to know or talk about this, maybe in some way like that there's just something that happens or something that's brought to light. I think you'd asked about this last time we talked. There might be some things that make it incontrovertible that we're all living a lie of sorts, and that we shouldn't be watching TV and we shouldn't be pursuing, our next Lexus, but that there's something really important we're all supposed to be doing that we only have one lifetime to do, and we've been completely distracted from it. Just like if you have a duck farm, you don't want ducks to know about migration. And, and what's even better is if you can convince them they don't know how to fly so you don't have to build fences around them.
Well, that's exactly right. We got to take a break right here, so let's do that. Our guest tonight, Chance Gardner. We're talking about the Magical Egypt Online Symposium and all stuff Egypt tonight with Chance Gardner. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires. This year we've experienced more than our fair share. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. And last month I decided to make sure my family does not have to worry about food should we get caught in a real emergency situation. Introducing Numana, a healthy, storable product that tastes so good that you'll want to eat it every day instead of just during those times of duress. All Numana products have a 25-year shelf life, are MSG and GMO-free, no preservatives, and are made in America. With the Numana pack in your home, you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that you've protected your family. Not only have I tasted and tested, I own it. Now you can too. Just click on the Numana banner on JimmyChurchRadio.com and use the promo code Jimmy when you order. In addition to a discount, we'll send you an autographed Fade to Black t-shirt. Seriously. Go Beckley Tappy. Do you want to be an official Fadernaut? Of course you do. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Just go to our membership section at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
If you have hard water, the Lime Scale not only leaves white spots, it clogs pipes and breaks down appliances, costing you hundreds of dollars in energy and wear. Eliminate Lime Scale and other water issues like brown staining and bad odors with HydroCare water products, available from Wave Home Solutions. Wave's affordable water systems don't use salts or chemicals. You'll love the way your water tastes, smells, and looks. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Are you intrigued by paranormal talk radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
To Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Chance Gardner is here. Magical Egypt, the online symposium is going on right now, and you can get all of the information by going to magicalegypt.com. We've got all of the links up, both over on the website and, of course, Twitter. And Chance, we're going through this, and one of the aspects of Egypt that, if you're in our circle, that's one thing. But outside of the circle, it's Hermeticism. You know, and we've got to go there. Now, you landed Milo, man, and I got to before we get to Lon, did you know he was a musician?
I'm hesitant to say this because I'm sure I'm going to embarrass myself. I've been playing guitar with Lon for a couple of decades. Lon is a huge friend of mine, and he and I performed together for a while when I was in California. I love him. Love his songs. I did not know that. He's like two people. He's Lon the musician. He was very famous in the 60s.
Very famous. And this is the thing, and we were talking about this earlier. We just had Kurt James on the show, and one of the things about Fade to Black is the combination of music and musicians and these subjects. I'm fascinated with that, and Lon is one of those cats, man.
He's just the nicest guy. He reminds me of Burl Ives he's like Burl Ives and Santa Claus rolled into one.
Right. And
he's such a funny person. You don't find many funny people in this genre.
And Hermeticism, right?
Well, amazing. So the things that we've been talking about have been very technical and engineering and stone-oriented, but one of the things that is really the life force of Magical Egypt, in addition to this technical business, is a lot of the people in the show are talking specifically about esotericism. One of the people that a huge friend of mine and just a really remarkable person is Dr. Aaron Cheek, who is a very good friend of mine. But the thing that we kind of bonded over originally was his actual doctoral thesis was in Schwaller de Lubic's. And this guy, he's a doctor of comparative religion. And so here's a very credible person that understands all of these different traditional religious, esoteric systems. Aaron's doing a talk called The Hermetic Arts as Egyptian Sciences. And when people think about esotericism or, the occult that comes from Egypt, they think of alchemy typically. But there are three sister sciences. Aaron's going to do a fantastic presentation of this. The three sister sciences in Egypt were alchemy, theurgy, and astrology. And I don't know if you've ever watched this, but Michael Schneider, who was in the original Magical Egypt, showed the way Egyptians did math and multiplication, and it's not the way we do it, but it works. It's different, but it works. And it's the height of ridiculous hubris to say, well, they're wrong because they don't do it the way that we do, because there's a lot of ways. If you use Egyptian math, you can do things that you can't do in our math. And, I'm sure it works the other way too. But Aaron shows, so alchemy, most people are familiar with alchemy, theurgy, and astrology all form this triad, and in this way are kind of the three sides of, here's the science that applies to mind, here's the science that applies to the outside world, here's the science that applies to the stars, and they're all interconnected. We also have Thomas Brown, Joseph Thomas Brown, and Thomas Sheridan, both of them talking about first of all, Thomas Sheridan is really getting into this sort of Gebser idea that you can judge the caliber or the grade or the quality of consciousness of a civilization, how smart they were, and just the caliber of their consciousness by looking at their art, by their
architecture,
mythos, the architecture, and all of that. Julia Cannon, that's going to be talking about this, is the daughter of Dolores Cannon, who she's a past life regressionist, and she's done so many past life regressions that she started finding this thing that she didn't expect, that in between incarnations there's this kind of place you go, and many people describe it similarly. And just as a personal aside, when I hear a lot of Freddie Mercury songs, I think that must be the song that's playing in the waiting room between incarnations. But anyway, the Egyptians, the esotericism that you talked about, the reason that's so important, that's why Egypt is for you. Everyone listening, Egypt is talking specifically to you. And when you hear these words like esotericism or theurgy or astrology, it's just really this science of understanding your psyche, your connection to the outside world, and specifically these very specific instructions about how you can maximize yourself. Like any bodybuilder, you're not finished when you're born. You're all scrawny and ropey and stuff, and there's this thing that you can do with this practice that makes your muscles big and your body beautiful. That same science does that to your mind. Imagine a ripped mind and a six-pack up in your head, and this ancient science isn't just materialistic. It describes consciousness, but not just the cycle that we know about, that you start as conception, and then you're incubated in the womb, and then you're born, and then you're a child, and then you're adult, and then you die. This science follows the entire cycle of consciousness from life to life to life. And it's a very touching thing. John West, right before he died, the last project he worked on before he died is he co-authored a book that just compiled the millions and millions of stories of people who've come back from the dead, or children who were born that have a complete, accurate memory of their life before. So, a little 7-year-old kid says, my real name is John Weston. I was a World War II pilot. My wife's name is Beatrice. We live at 127 Fake Street. And you go, and there's Beatrice at that address. And it's another one of those things that Orthodox science just hates to talk about. It's a good way to get eyes rolling. But the science of the ancient world, as will be detailed by a number of people in the symposium, draws attention to this other model of consciousness, where your consciousness, just the way that imagine if you're still driving the first car you ever owned, you keep trading up these vehicles like a cosmic what's that video game? Grand Theft Auto. You keep trading your vehicles in, and your consciousness keeps evolving through this series of incarnations. And so there's this idea that Plato postulated this thing called anamnesis. And what it means is soul memory. And I think part of the reason why people respond so much to just looking at ancient Egypt is that either one of these two models is correct, that you're just dead, the big black sack once you're dead, or you're not, and consciousness is this thing that lives on from body to body and over vast amounts of time. And so if the premise is true that you've lived millions perhaps of lives, this idea of anamnesis means that you never learn anything new, but when you see something that's true that you learned in some previous incarnation, you instantly recognize it's true. And so the way that we respond to music, you just either like something right away or you don't. And the way you see someone's face that you've never seen before, but you already know you have chemistry with them, and you have some dynamic where you have to get up in their tree and figure out why they look so familiar to you. So I love this idea, and it works in art too. The reason why we respond to art, some people love Jackson Pollock and some people love Salvador Dali, that you recognize something from previous lives. I've probably told you this. I've played guitar my whole life, but there's a fairly famous guitar player in Los Angeles that I used to sit with. And I would sit with him, and I found that in just a couple of weeks of playing guitar with this guy, I connected to what must have been 100 years worth of guitar lessons. Like, I've never taken a guitar lesson. And I just all of a sudden discovered that I had this just like suitcase I'd never looked in before that was full of guitar licks.
Who was it?
Intuitive knowledge.
Who was it?
We've talked to him. He doesn't like it when I drop his name. You and I have talked to him. He used to live in the same building with him when you lived by
Okay. All right.
You know.
Okay.
He gets mad when I drop his name. Okay. But anyway, he's an amazing guitarist. He's just and in person better than you think. But I'm just sitting in his field, sitting next to him, and I just all of a sudden was like, I could do these things that are not easy, and I'm just, I'm not a meticulous person, and I certainly haven't spent enough time to earn the right to play guitar the way I do. But that's just my personal story. But there were so many people who've connected with something important about themselves that they don't know why they know it. They don't know why they're compelled to do it. And so I found this idea of soul memory very interesting, and it certainly jives with the Egyptian model of consciousness, that you have this massive store of information you can draw upon if you learn how to do it. So, any professional artist knows how to draw on that voice.
Isn't it fascinating how Hermeticism and Thoth and the entire educational system around the world all got together in Egypt, shared their ideas, and that we're talking about 2000 BC, right?
Yeah.
Right? And
conservatively,
and how that knowledge influenced everything on this planet. It permeated out and into every culture here.
And you can see the symbols. What's kind of interesting, Graham Hancock says this all the time, we're a species with amnesia. These symbols all attest, and you see them in architecture. Like you can walk down the street in London and you can see these symbols, these architectural symbols. Like architecture speaks in this language, just like hieroglyphs.
That's right.
Heraldry, coat of arms, there's a language of that. There's all kinds of visual languages. And that amazes me.
The symbolism of the sun and the winged disc and what it represents. Look, we can talk about Sitchin, we can talk about Egypt, we can talk about Ra, Isis, whatever you want to attribute to it. But the symbolism is there, and it is everywhere on this planet. We were talking about. I brought up the gods of Egypt earlier. The winged disc, could it be a craft? Could it be Nibiru? Could it be this? Okay, well, put all of that aside. The way that Hollywood dealt with it in the Gods movie that I was talking about earlier was they had Ra was pulling the sun with chains around. Have you seen Gods of Egypt?
No, it's it's been on my list and I just haven't yet.
Just go and watch it, because everything that we talk about on the show is touched upon in the movie. All of the gods are there and so forth. But Ra has got this platform, this ship, this satellite, and he's orbiting the Earth, and he is towing the sun with chains. Wow. And he's circling the Earth, and every 24 hours. But you have to see how they deal with it, which goes back to the sun disk and the winged disc. But this symbolism is everywhere on this planet, and it all started, right there in Egypt.
Yeah. If you look around there, if you look at the Sumerians and Akkadians, and I'm fascinated with Zecharia Sitchin, except if you talk about him at all, you have to acknowledge that he's one of like 8 or 9 or 12 people in the world that can read that language, and everyone else that can read the language says he's full of shit. He's I hope I can swear.
Full of poo-poo. Right.
And I really want that to be true, because that is the coolest and explains so much. And there's a lot of crazy people just making stuff up, and there's a whole cottage industry of just making stuff up about that. But there's some really careful people. Do you know Lloyd Pye? Have you ever talked to Lloyd Pye?
I know every word of Lloyd Pye.
Lloyd Pye is another one of those people that's really hard to argue with. He even shows that our DNA is not natural. We have our last 2 chromosomes or whatever are fused, and that our DNA appears to have been modified. And saying who did that, is kind of a leap, but you can't deny the fact that our DNA isn't like anything else on Earth. And I really love that whole idea, because in a way it puts a neat bow on where did this anomalous information come from. But also when you think about, America's only been around for a couple hundred years, and look where we've come. We've come from ox and plow to satellites. And it only took 200 years. So if Egyptians stood in place for even 5,000 years, you can imagine just human ingenuity and human intellect over the space of even 1,000 years. You're going to come up with some amazing things. And I believe there's a point at which you can't progress technologically. There's a point at which you're all the way smart. You understand the game, and then you don't need machines as much because you can use natural forces to do the amazing things.
There's a guy out there, his name is Eric Vandenberg, and you spell his name A-E-R-I-K, Eric.
Okay.
And go look up his work and his essays, but one of the things that he presents is he debunks the debunkers, right? And he's a very educated guy. I'm not going to go there, but his presentations on debunking, like Heiser, who went out of his way to tear Sitchin apart, right? He's got a website called Sitchin is Wrong. Well, anyway, go and check out his work, because what he has done, one of the things that Heiser has said over the years is that go look at the Chicago University automatic lookup for the Sumerian text, and gold is never said once, right? So I went, and when Heiser said that, I went and looked, and I found out that Heiser was actually wrong. I couldn't take the time to look and read up, all of the Sumerian text and stuff, but I knew that Heiser was wrong, and I don't want to take away from Michael. I don't talk smack about anybody, but what it did prevent me from doing is reading anything more about Heiser. I wasn't concerned about it. If you're wrong once, and you're attacking somebody. So anyway, on Eric Vandenberg's site, he goes back and he analyzes all of the Sumerian texts, which clay tablet, the number, and he breaks it all down, and it's fascinating to read. So go and actually check that out. Before we get ahead of ourselves, I got to say, you got Max Egan coming on. He's one of my favorites.
How about Max?
Man. What is he going to be talking about?
He, he's such a diverse character.
I know.
And he's a consultant for international news. He's on Al Jazeera all the time, like actually on Iranian news. I can't even figure out how he swings that. But anyway, he's talking about this question that's really been burdening me. Why has our history been hidden from us? Is it part of just creating an artificial bubble for us that disconnects us from our power center? But Max has this incredible, as you know, an incredible analytical mind, and he has this voice that's just like medicine. It heals my cells to hear him talk. He has such a pleasant voice. And if you ever, remarkable man, incredible intelligence, and he's kind of a social analyst. He, living in Australia, there's so few people here, and the police and the government are really quite in your face. And I think that technically we're all subjects of the Queen, so we have fewer rights here. And so this is one of those places where you really need people like Max to point out when society's starting to break down and what, basic human sovereignty is. And there's so many incredible things. He's just an advocate for the growth of people. And in this case, he's bringing his considerable intellect to bear on this mystery where people who are actually looking at ancient Egypt and looking at our past see one thing, but everything you hear, not everything, most of the things you hear on television, in books, in school, in academia, are all creating this false sense of our past that is actually quite disempowering and also disunifying. I know that's not a word, but what's the opposite of bringing people together? It isolates and disempowers the citizens. And so when you hear Max dissect some of these situations and just point things out to you, thing after thing after thing, about how the illusion that we live in this free and intellectually free world, when in fact it's, almost 180 degrees away from that there are sacred cow ideas that you better not mess with, whether they're true or not. And anyway, he brings that one-of-a-kind Max Egan thing to a lot of these subjects. One of the first interviews I did for Magical Egypt was Max. He just lives up the road from me. He used to play guitar with Steve Vai. Do you know that? He was on the road with Steve
Max Egan played with Steve Vai? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
See, once again, we've made 20 guitar connections tonight on the show, and I haven't done that in a while. Why, and I know we've touched upon this in the past, Chance, but why hide our history and continue? Because it was easy to do 20 years ago, right, before the internet. Today, it's not that kind of party. And
Pandora's box.
That's right. And we have the ability now to call BS on any subject. On any subject. Why continue to hide our past?
Yeah. Brad Clausen, out of nowhere. No one's calling Brad and asking Brad about our past. He just, like me, he's an artist. He started pulling the thread on this sweater, and it just kept unraveling and unraveling. And suddenly he showed the very oldest the very first works of art, the Venus of Willendorf, and these just weird little statues that look like a little fat woman with big boobs. Then that statue progressed over time, thousands and thousands of years, and it worked its way into the Diana and Athena and Ishtar statues. Ishtar was, the female goddess from Sumeria. Oh, I want to talk about that. The winged disc in Sumeria, by the way, has a little guy in it driving it around, to your point. That's an interesting thing. But anyway, I'm sorry, Jimmy, what were we talking about?
You brought up, you've somehow weaved Brad Clausen into this conversation.
Oh,
and
so,
I wasn't even there. I'm holding off Brad for the next segment. And on top of that, now I'm going to throw you under the bus. You didn't give Brad his due. He is one of the most amazing artists on planet Earth, bar none.
He really is.
Okay, and you can't just bring in Brad and not tell the audience who he is. So that's your fault, and I was holding off on that. But so let's save Brad for after the break. Why is it that they continue to suppress our history with us? What's the advantage of doing that?
This is another one where I have to tread carefully and choose my words, but there is this organization, this superstructure that is the most wealthy structure in the world. Have you ever been to the Vatican? Have you ever walked around the Vatican?
I have not.
There is a lot of money in religion, my friend. There is a lot of money in religion. And the first thing that you understand, the minute you make that leap and you start taking the Egyptians seriously, and you're like, well, maybe the people that made the pyramids might know what they're talking about this other thing, about consciousness. And in a huge way, if you buy into the Egyptian model, you've all of a sudden you got to pick one or the other. You pick the model of consciousness that modern Western Christianity presents, or you present this other model that has a very different story about what happens after you die and what happens before you die, a very different story about the role of people. Although, it was told through allegory, that if you look at the allegories, right, but it's a sort of game of Chinese whispers, that one of the things I found is almost all of the sacred texts, if you look at them the right way, and this is the case with symbolism in general, anything good is going to have layers of application and layers of meaning. So as Ed and Laird point out, if you look at a symbol, it has a biological significance, it has a scientific significance, it has a psychological significance, it has a scientific, there's embryology. So there's layers of every symbol. And so a symbol doesn't have to, in fact, the difference between a symbol and a sign, this is the science of semiotics. The difference between a symbol and a sign just means one thing. You see that red octagon, it means one thing. But when you see the winged disc, it is an entire college curriculum all crammed into one little thing. And it just keeps unfolding and unfolding.
Right.
And that's one of the things that amazes me. So again, I'm sorry I've taken so long to answer your question, but I really believe that anybody who has supremacy and control of the world and such a massive income stream is going to cause a problem for you if the public starts looking into alternate ways of thinking about the afterlife. And so there are a number of people in our symposium that are specifically talking about this other model of consciousness where we're not always in physical bodies, and that really spirituality, Hermeticism, the message of Hermeticism is you are not your body. You are this intelligence that rides around in your meat wagon, but that's not you. You're not the meat wagon. You are the passenger in the carriage.
So what you're suggesting, you don't have to choose I'll choose your words for you then. Thank you. What you are suggesting is that if the knowledge gets out that we don't need the Vatican or religion in general, that it's all been a charade, then, well, there's going to be a lot of pissed off people, but also the value of the church negates and shrinks.
a substantial interruption in cash flow, and every organization is built to keep that from happening, you know?
Yeah, George Carlin said it best, right? When it comes to religion, that the famous quote, but that you're going to burn in hell, and if you don't do everything on the Ten Commandments, and you don't live by the words, that you're going to burn through for eternity, and fire and brimstone. But he needs your money, right? Right. All knowing, has the answers to everything, but he's broke. You know,
he loves gold.
Yeah, he loves gold. Our guest tonight, Chance Gardner, talking about Magical Egypt, the online symposium going on for the next 2 weeks. The most unbelievable list of presenters and guests. We're going to continue next with Brad Clausen right after this break.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Poor water quality is a major health issue, and it's only getting worse. Municipalities can't keep up, standards have dropped, and pollutants are increasing. Where does it all end? It ends by keeping the pollutants outside of your home with HydroCare's advanced systems available at Wave Home Solutions. No less than the best purification materials and processes have been developed by HydroCare to provide you with healthy, clean water for drinking, cooking, and showering. HydroCare far surpasses the competition in removing chlorine, odors, iron, lead, chemicals, limescale, and much more. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water. We'll take care of the toughest water problems for you, whether it's from a city or well source. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, call 888-997-WAVE. That's 888-997-WAVE. Or go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRARadio.com.
Does your basement or crawl space have a damp, musty smell? Well, watch out. That's a sign of too much moisture and not enough ventilation. And that can mean increased mold growth and the buildup of harmful toxins and gases. Don't bother with a dehumidifier. It just circulates the same unhealthy air. Now there's a better way to remove these dangers and odors. It's with the computerized Wave Moisture Control Unit that reduces moisture and expels pollutants.
We replaced our old dehumidifier with the Wave unit, and in only 3 weeks, our basement is dry and the musty smell is gone.
Wave units require no maintenance, no buckets of water or filters, and costs only pennies a day to run. Breathe better, live healthier with an affordable, no-maintenance Wave unit. Call 888-717-WAVE, 888-717-WAVE, or visit dryhealthyhome.com. Dryhealthyhome.com.
Ride the wave. Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I only drink Fade to Black blend coffee from River Moon. Just click on the River Moon coffee banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Promo code F2B Blend.
So are you tired of being tired? Well, then it's time to get the tea. Hey, it's Lisa here to tell you about this all-natural, all-organic tea I've been drinking that has had great results for over 20 years. It's called Life Change Tea, and it's specially formulated to help detoxify and cleanse your kidneys, liver, colon, and blood all at once. The colon is one of the most ignored organs in the human body. The faster that waste is eliminated from the body, the less time that waste sits in our intestines, spreading toxins to our bloodstream. This tea helps cleanse chemicals caused by outside intruders from our entire digestive system. And get this, weight loss can be a side effect. And with continued use of the tea, you can experience clearer, healthier, younger looking skin, increased energy, and a happier outlook on life. So if you're tired of being tired, get the Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. And like me, you'll be glad you did.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why fade to black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Guest tonight, Chance Gardner, Magical Egypt, the director, Magical Egypt 1 and 2. Now they're doing an online symposium, Magical Egypt. It kicked off yesterday, October 1st, and all of the links to the symposium are right there at jimmychurchradio.com. We also have it up in Twitter and magicalegypt.com. All the information is there. Chance, now listen, Brad Clausen. We're talking about obviously Pearl Jam, but Metallica, Fish, Alice in Chains, one of the best artists on the planet.
Right this minute, he's working on something for Nine Inch Nails.
That's what I'm talking about. And his presentation that he did in Magical Egypt 2 absolutely floored me. But if you are going to listen to somebody talk about art and its significance and its symbolism, then you have somebody like Brad Clausen on, and he is hands down one of the great artists of our generation.
He really is. When you look at his work, and I'm sure he has a website, but amazing work. He does concert posters, and they're just legendary. And what makes him so powerful is he uses esoteric symbolism. I mean, that's his stock and trade. And so it's just dripping with esotericism and hermeticism and occult imagery. And so it's just, and it's hypnotic. He's a technical master, but his use of symbolism and just that raw power, remarkable man. And as we've discussed before, I think he's listening right now, so I'm not going to say anything bad about him.
Hey, Brad.
No, he's a remarkable man, and was really I don't know if you know this or if anybody knows this, but Brad was the one that talked me into doing Magical Egypt 2. John had been bugging me about it for a while, but you know how contentious the world has gotten. I just sometimes don't want to throw my hat into the fighting ring. And Brad was such a fan of the original Magical Egypt that he went with John to Egypt because he was so inspired by Magical Egypt. And he had started to notice all of these things in art, and he didn't know what to do with it. Nobody would take him seriously, and nobody would fund any research. And so he came to me with this series of findings that we're going to talk about, and it is another one of those game changers. This should be called the Game Changer Symposium because every person here has thrown a spanner in the works of Egyptology.
Well, you know, you're an artist, I'm an artist, and we all know as an artist when you see something and you're immediately a little bit jealous of somebody's talent, but you also appreciate the talent, and you're like, you know, how does he or she do this? Where does it come from? It's the creative side, but then you have the technical side and the appreciation of the art. And Brad, if you're listening, he's just one of those guys where I just went, wow, okay, that's the real deal. And where does this come from? How does he pull this off? But he is he's of that caliber. He is an extraordinary artist.
And it's good for me to be around him because I was in Hollywood for long enough that I left with, well, let's just say there's this kind of American condition that the rest of the world hates us for, that we're just so full of ourselves. And I certainly was guilty of that. And it was really good for me to be around people like Brad because he's so humble. And if you just met him in a train station or something or stood next to him in a bus line, you'd never know what a world-class figure he is because he's a genuine, good, and humble person. I think that's part of being able to produce good art is you have this honesty and you can reveal your heart and it's not all horrible and full of worms. If you're a good person, it comes through in your art.
Yeah, I've got to get Brad on the show, but I'm going to ask you this question because he he was able to see 3D through this Egyptian art and able to make these connections. Did you discuss this with him? What was the moment where he just went, "Holy crap! Okay, there's something here."
He'd found a couple precedents. There were these paintings that these neurologists, if you look around, there was this thing that made a huge kind of earthquake, seismic ripples through the art community, through art and scientific community. There was a neuroscientist, Brad talks about it in the show, who started noticing in one of, I think it's Michelangelo, where God reaches out his hand and then Adam reaches out his hand to God and they almost touch, but they don't quite touch.
Yeah, it's on that's the Sistine Chapel, isn't it? The ceiling?
Yeah, it's on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, yeah.
Right.
That this guy Meshberger, who was a brain scientist and also an art aficionado, noticed that in this Leonardo painting that God and this display, this kind of cluster of angels, and they're all over this kind of kidney-shaped red background, and the fabric that it's on has these really characteristic wrinkles and folds in it, and there's little angels, and Sophia, the personage of Sophia, coming, is in the arm of God, and then God is stretched across this thing, and where God's wang is, where the regenerative area, I'll probably go to hell for saying God's wang, where God's wang is, it's where the thalamus is.
Yes, we know what you're talking about, Chance.
Sorry about that. It took a while to get there. But so Brad first started noticing that and in Da Vinci and in all the people who were rumored to be part of the secret society, they all seemed to be paying homage to the fact that the ancients somehow knew exactly the architecture of the brain. So it wasn't even a starting point. I think that was something he found to validate himself after he started making these discoveries. But as I was mentioning, he found Venus of Willendorf, which is this thing that is by Orthodox people. There are people who say this is about 60,000 years old, this sculpture. And the traditional story about it was that it's just this totemistic thing, and maybe early pornography, because it's just it looks like a fat woman with two giant breasts, except she doesn't have a face, and her head is this big knob with a bunch of kind of nipples all over it. And art history majors will trace the evolution of statuary from the Venus of Willendorf, which is a very crude thing, all the way through to these statues of Diana, Ishtar, and there's another one, Diana, Ishtar, and
I think that sculpture, like one of the original one that you're talking about, I think that's in the Pope's office.
Wow. And in the British Museum, there's a big giant wall where she's standing there. So what you'll see in all these statues is that their torsos are very pronounced, and from about the waist up, covered in these weird nipples in one case. But the way they hold their hands up, they do this weird kind of Ronnie James Dio, that thing that you do at rock concerts. You hold your hands up and make the devil sign.
Yeah.
The girls, the women in these statues are holding their arms up at sort of an uncomfortable angle and in a position. And what Brad noticed, the stock and trade in an artist, by the way, is their right hemisphere, and the right hemisphere is involved in matching things. Like, I noticed this shape is the same shape as this, or I noticed that this cluster of symbols is the same from this unrelated thing. Artists really are good at recognizing similarities and patterns, because that's the muscle we work all day. And so Brad started noticing that in these famous statues, they depict the brainstem, and the way that they stand and the way that their hands are. If you look at a human brainstem next to this statue, it's another one of those moments where you can't even argue with it. And it explains all these things that art historians never understood, like, didn't the ancients know how many nipples a woman had, or didn't they know that this wasn't correct, or they don't have giant shoulders like this? And what he shows is those statues that have really big shoulders and overdeveloped hips. It's the brain stem and the thalamus at the top, these two big heavy lobes. If you look at the show or watch Brad's presentation, you'll see these visuals where this is a perfect representation of not just an important brain architecture, but the part of the brain architecture that's responsible for consciousness. And the only way that we can have these visionary or religious or spiritual experiences is because of this core part of the brain, the hip, the diencephalon and the brain stem. which is the lizard brain or the R complex. And that seems to be where these really powerful spiritual experiences, the whole Kundalini mechanism, take place. And so one of the premises in Magical Egypt was this idea of didactic art, that art in the past isn't used the way we use it. Art in the past was didactic or educational. And so it again raises the question, who knew this and who was trying to teach this to who? But in the statuary that Brad found, not only defined that all of these, well, the brain stem in particular, and this very important thing at the top of the brain stem called the diencephalon, where the pineal gland, the pituitary, and the thalamus is. That's where the third eye is that all the cultures revere. And, the reason that Hindus wear that bindi point on their forehead, to celebrate the fact that this is the center of consciousness and this is where our spirituality comes from. And so it's another one of those examples of where in the modern day, we'll see a work of art and we think art is to cover up space on the motel room in your hotel in Howard Johnson's, or, I need something to put on my mantelpiece that makes it not seem so empty. And for us, art serves a fundamentally different function. But in the past, art was used to uplift humanity. And apparently they knew not only the articulations of the stem, but there's a famous papyrus called the Smith Papyrus, Edwin Smith, I believe. And it is this papyrus that shows areas of the brain and what they're responsible for. So it's another thing that Egyptology absolutely denies. That, in fact, a lot of people say, even very progressive people insist that the Egyptians didn't know what the brain was for. And here we have not only all these schematics of the brain, my discovery of the pylon that shows you, it maps out exactly the articulations of the brain, right. But that this Edwin Smith papyrus, from, it's famous and everyone knows about it. It specifically says if someone can't move their right leg, it's this part of the brain. If, your sinuses are, and so it's easily provable that they absolutely understood the brain at least as well as we do. And there's that whole important thing that modern science to this day cannot tell you what consciousness is, but where consciousness comes from. They don't know what the pineal gland's for. They know it's involved in certain things. Rick Strassman is actually the one that's made more progress than just about anybody I know. But you see in statuary that the statuary is communicating this highly technical, scientific information in this way that is beautiful. I mean, just absolutely beautiful.
The creation of Adam, on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I remember Brad, again, I hold him guilty for this because now I see the brain and the outline of the brain and the brainstem all over the place. It is something that you can't escape. And it's certainly something that the Egyptians were not only cognizant of, but clearly wanted to represent and show us what was going on. But where God is in the Sistine Chapel with Adam, they're holding out, they're almost touching their fingers. God is in the middle of a brain. That's exactly what's going on there. Most people are going to see, like you mentioned, material or draping material or velvet or whatever it is, but it's not. Yeah, it looks like
red velvet.
Yeah, but it's not. It's the brain.
And so where God is, where his hand is, for a while I was making the show, I knew all these terms for all the parts of the brain, but where the woman comes out, there's a baby and there's a woman. The woman is Sophia, and Sophia is the embodiment of wisdom. That's where that word philosophy comes from. It means the love of Sophia. She basically, if you take a brain and overlay that over that painting, she is where the thalamus is. There's a baby that has this weird, it's kind of a weird posture, and it's next to this wrinkle. Yep. So where the occipital lobe is in the brain, the occipital lobe is kind of this weird spongy bit that's different, that's separated from the brain. That's indicated. The thalamus, the pineal, the pituitary are indicated. The major vessels. The third and fourth ventricle are extremely important, both in the hallucinogenic process and the Kundalini process and hypnagogic state and dreaming and whatnot. So that's all depicted there. But that's actually a fairly modern, that's a fairly modern thing. Brad found there was another painting, the something of Christ, where Christ is standing on a hill and he's upright and there's a cloud over him. And oddly enough, it's the cloud that Terry Gilliam used when God talks in Monty Python. Right. It's that cloud. It's the cloud from that painting. Right. And so this thing has kind of a, how do I explain it? When you step back and look at this painting, Or what we did is when you take actual drawings of the brain and spinal column and you put it over this painting, the clouds form the two hemispheres. The Jesus figure in the middle is the brain stem. God himself is positioned at the place of the third eye in these clouds. So Brad saw that, and it was another one of those, like you'd said, once you see it everywhere. Once you understand the key, then all kinds of things speak to you. But what he discovered that would never have occurred to me, and this is where it ties into ancient Egypt, there's a very characteristic, like iconic statue, ram statue. Anybody who's ever been to Karnak in Egypt, you visit the temple by going through this hall of these very beautiful rams. And the rams, their chin rests on this little man who's standing there, and he has kind of a pronounced torso and his legs come together, and he's under the chin of the ram. So if you look at this ram from the front, rams have that interesting Y nose, like dogs and moose and seals and stuff have this nose. It's kind of a Y. And then the ram's horns come out to the side and they curve. So when you take that ram head and superimpose it on the statue, or you superimpose it on the brain, it is another one of those things that this art represents the ram when you look at it. But when you actually look at the outline of it, it is the perfect outline of the hemispheres, and the ram's snout is the corpus callosum. And then this little man standing under the chin of the ram that the ram's chin is resting on is another brainstem, like the Ishtar and Diana statues. And so even in Egypt, way before whatever period produced Ishtar, contemporary with Ishtar actually, because that was from Sumeria or Babylonia, that this thing is a perfect reproduction of the brainstem, and to the point where on the little man under the ram, the uraeus that comes out of his head is exactly where the infundibulum is. And if you look at every feature on this sculpture, it exactly corresponds to some significant part of the brainstem. And so this is, I'm sure, at least a decade of research on Brad's part, showing that not only was their understanding of the brain really complete, and in some cases more advanced than our own, but the thing that impresses me so much and that really appeals to all artists is that they managed to present this technical schematic in a way that was so beautiful, and it was so beautiful, and it works on its own as a work of art, that nobody even considered the possibility that this thing was actually expressing this really important scientific principle. So where we go in the next, we're actually culminating the series 2 with where Brad's work leads to, which is, it's basically this thing that alerts you to what we know of as the third eye, and this imperative that every human has to stop being externally focused all the time and to start doing this very simple series of meditations and activities. And as you've done recently, you got to start paying attention to the vehicle, and you can't have a bunch of crap. You don't put molasses in your car. If you want to drink all you want, but if you want to have a spiritual experience, your pineal gland doesn't work when you're drinking alcohol. So all of these things that seem like just boring are actually necessary steps in creating the alchemical athanor. The alchemical test tube is your body. You are the alchemical test tube. And the reason why that's so important is that your body can either detract from your brain or add to your brain, depending on how healthy you are and how clean your bloodstream is. And also that other weird issue that instead of expending your sexuality, that metaphor of manna from heaven, you get this certain allowance every day of this life force. And if you don't expend it to make children or whatever, it stays in you, and it has a secondary purpose where it starts, it catalyzes this change in your bloodstream that supercharges your brain, your pineal gland, and these spiritual things. So the message of ancient Egypt, Brad was one of the first people to make it so explicit that these sculptures specifically point to the parts of your brain that are changeable, and all of those mythical properties of consciousness that seem like supernatural stories, like empathy and the ability to read people's minds, or the ability to bilocate, or just the simple, very understandable goal of regeneration. So you live to be crazy ages. All of these sciences are contained in just understanding the yoga of building up this magnetic field, or amplifying light, as the Freemasons say. It's all about this inner light. So the halos that were around holy figures in old art, and the Indians, they wear that headdress that fans out from their head,
right?
The Japanese rising sun flag, all of these things that show emanating light are all symbolic of this this process whereby you can, they call it opening your third eye, and it has a much more scientific, it's based in science. It's not just a crazy new age stuff, but that is really the point of yoga, the really ancient yoga, the Vedantic yoga and the Vedantic sciences, is not just to get your body clean and operational, but then further to do the same thing to these brain centers that we have control over. Just like you can build up your pecs or you can lose weight, you can build up these brain centers by doing these traditional exercises, and Egypt tells you how to do them. And
did you know frogs? Did you know that frogs have third eyes?
Really? Vestigial? I know birds do too.
There are a bunch of reptiles. I did it. I did the list a couple of weeks ago on the show, but functioning third eyes.
Wow.
Absolutely. Oh, Rita wanted me to ask you about the platypus.
What about it?
I don't know, but now they're showing videos. I think it was more about God's humor and maybe.
Hilarious! Was that a Carlin joke?
That was a George Carlin joke. Now I made the connection.
That's the platypus is an example of God's sense of humor. That's hilarious.
They're showing videos on Twitter right now, but yeah, the whole list of reptiles and animals with third eyes functioning like And we had it. We just let it go. I wanted to ask you before we head to the break. There is so much talk about the calcification and the degradation of the pineal gland. What do you think actually caused it? In that, I mean, we obviously used it. It's there. And there's so much talk about getting it back going and what we can do about it. But what caused it?
Oh, I know the answer to this. There's actually two things. One of them, surprisingly, came from Rick Strassman. When Thomas Edison did us the incredible favor of creating artificial light, humanity before light and even before fire, the amount of time you spend around a light source has a huge effect on your pineal gland. And so when we went from caves to candles, just an artificial light of any kind starts making you stay up later, but exposure to light has this effect on your pineal gland. The more light you're around, the smaller your pineal gland is for some reason. And it's an interesting side story that this guy Mantak Chia, that's a kind of a tantric energy worker, and the Egyptian mystery schools. If you were an initiate in the Egyptian mystery schools, there was a very necessary thing that you had to spend 5 years underground in the dark, which just seems weird and punitive until you realize that Mantak Chia, and lots of other people, but now Rick Strassman just said this same thing again. As soon as humans started hanging around these environments where there's perpetual 24-hour light and then artificial light, which is much brighter, our pineal gland has been shrinking since the invention of the light bulb, and it's been shrinking since our use of fire, but the light bulb hugely accelerated it. And then the other one is almost a tropism, fluoride in the water. Absolutely calcifies your pineal gland and shuts down your radio. Alcohol, if you ever want to stop being psychic instantly, take a shot of alcohol.
Really?
Oh, man, instantly. Don't ever die when you're drunk, by the way.
Oh.
Sure.
Well,
if you're about to go before a firing squad, don't be
that's
drunk.
interesting because we've all heard, your life flashes, you have this adrenaline rush, the panchromatic life review, right? And that adrenaline rush, which is normally attributed to all of this, is probably the massive dose of DMT being spit out by the pineal gland from that adrenaline rush. And that's the life review that you get. It's from DMT, not from adrenaline.
And so how cruel if it was done on purpose, and how horrific it was done accidentally, that every day and refined sugar too, every day that we're consuming this chemical in our water. This is a whole other conversation. And it sounds like a conspiracy theory. So a lot of people I was surprised that Rick Strassman didn't know about pineal. Before he went on the thing, I showed him, there's a bunch of YouTubes by really credentialed doctors. It's not in contest. It's not contested that fluoride in the water, so if you're drinking city water, do yourself a favor and start, buying bottled water in a glass, because there are some things that actually affect. It's like being castrated on a spiritual level, the calcification of the pineal gland. The pineal gland at puberty substantially reduces. And then when your sexual time is over, it comes back on. So old people, their pineal gland comes back. The reason kids are so psychic, kids are reading the minds of their parents almost perpetually. It's just part of biology. And their pineal gland is huge and, it's good and operational when you're young. And then for some reason at puberty, whether you're around light, whether you've ever had sugar, whether you've ever had fluoride, your pineal gland just gets smaller. But the point of this work is to build it up like a muscle. And there's combinations of meditation practices and other stuff, retention exercises that are literally the thing that you do. It's a yoga specifically for your pineal gland that'll bring it back online. And if you at this point, let me just interject something. Another really important part of Magical Egypt is the difference between these two words, operative and speculative. A lot of Egyptology, just like Masonry, has those two terms. Speculative means you talk about something and you study it. Operative means you do it.
Okay, stop right. I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to take a break. We're going to go into overtime because this is too important. We got to go right there. Okay, so now I know you're busy. You've got the symposium, but I've got to keep you for a few more minutes, so we're going to do that. Chance, don't go anywhere. Magical Egypt, Chance Gardner, the Magical Egypt Symposium. Everything is right there at magicalegypt.com. Of course, we have it up in Twitter and over at jimmychurchradio.com. We will continue where we are leaving off right after this short break. Stay with us.
Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires. This year we've experienced more than our fair share. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and last month I decided to make sure my family does not have to worry about food should we get caught in a real emergency situation. Introducing Numana, a healthy, storable product that tastes so good that you'll want to eat it every day instead of just during those times of duress. All Numana products have a 25-year shelf life, are MSG and GMO-free, no preservatives, and are made in America. With the Numana pack in your home, you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that you've protected your family. Not only have I tasted and tested, I own it. Now you can too. Just click on the Numana banner on jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code Jimmy when you order. In addition to a discount, we'll send you an autographed Fade to Black t-shirt. Seriously, go Beckley Tappy. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I take Life Change Tea supplements every single day. It's what I do. Click on their banner at jimmychurchradio.com. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Yes, River Moon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy.
Hi folks, CBD is the home run hitter for health right now. Why, you ask? Because of what it does for the body. Unfortunately, I can't tell you all about the benefit. There's reasons. Do your due diligence and log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com. Ancient Life Oil uses organic ingredients and is blended in coconut oil for some of the best benefits. Legal in 50 states and non-psychoactive. Log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and my family is safe because of Numana Emergency Food Storage. Just go to the Numana banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Promo code Jimmy10.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What a great show tonight. Chance Gardner, Magical Egypt. The symposium is going on right now. It started yesterday. Almost 2 straight weeks of the absolutely best of the best. And now, Chance, right before the break, what were we talking about?
There was these really important terms. They're terms from Freemasonry. They're operative and speculative.
Right.
Speculative means that you study something from afar. You read statistics about it. You talk to other people about it. And you study it. You watch it. Operative means you dive in and you do it. So you can learn statistics about baseball, or you can play baseball. You can learn about every famous conductor, or you can pick up a violin and try and play. The reason why it's such an important Masonic term is that this is another one of those secrets to really approaching ancient Egypt, that you can think about it, and you can talk about it, and you can study it from afar, but it's not meant for that. This is an activity book. This is something that you do, and it tells you things you do. It directly relates to you. It's not a bunch of pointless historical nonsense. This might be thought of as an instruction manual, or sometimes we even toy with the idea that this is the long-lost owner's manual. Doesn't it seem weird that you have such a complicated machine and nobody's ever given you an owner's manual for it? And Egypt is that thing. And it's not just a bunch of random ideas. This is operative. This gives you the tools to actually change yourself and achieve these states of mind that are on display in Egypt. It wasn't just a time-bound thing that only people in the past could be smart. It's this thing that you can work towards, like yoga or like martial arts or like bodybuilding, only it's this psycho-spiritual series of activities.
We've only got a little bit of time left, and we've got so many other presenters that I want to touch upon that are amazing, like Becca. And
good on you, Becca Tarnas. How amazing.
Becca Tarnas. And now, is she going to be discussing religion? What is she going to do?
Well, there's a very interesting thing that we've talked about with in episode 3, we talk about this state called the hypnagogic state. Oh, another extremely hip person in the show, Gary Lockman, who was from Blondie. I don't know if you remember that. Gary Lockman is an amazing artist, amazing author nowadays, and just fascinating person. But he started this conversation about the hypnagogic state. The hypnagogic state is another one of those things, and it ties right into operative. We've been on a roll with the transitions today. There is this room that you can't physically walk into, but you're always in it. This room is up in your head, and you think that consciousness is just this one room you live in. But then you notice there's this little door, and if you walk through that door, there's all these other floors and wings and halls of consciousness that most people don't really understand. So way back, there was a scientist / theologian named Swedenborg who started noticing that in the transition between waking and sleeping, there was this special state of consciousness. It was called the hypnagogic state. So Swedenborg, and then later Carl Jung, there was this guy Wilson Van Dusen, and a lot of Indian people. Of course,
Jung famously said, my life changed when I found the door.
Yeah, wow, isn't that true? I didn't realize that, but one of the first thing I say in every episode of Magical Egypt is there's a door in your head that nobody told you about. And that's just that symbolism of the door, and that is exactly it. There's this door you walk through, and it shows you, first of all, that your consciousness is not completely your own. You start in this room that is entirely your consciousness, but if you start looking through all the back caves and, start looking in the cupboards, you'll find secret passageways that lead to these places where it seems to be common ground where we all meet in this psychic sense, and it feels like a dream world, only very much like the DMT experience. It seems to have an objective reality. It's just this place you go where you have to leave your body behind. So this ties into the afterlife experience. It ties very much into the spirituality of the ancient Egyptians and when they would leave their body and communicate with the gods. And we've all had these experiences where you sleep in a little too late, or as you're falling to sleep, things happen in your brain. Like I often notice I can see my room in 360 degrees. I don't just see where my eyes go, but in the hypnagogic state, you have this kind of 360 degree view. A lot of artists use it. As you said, Jung, part of the pillar of modern psychology was that Jung had this experience. And so the thing they all say that makes it so weird is there are people that are not you that live in this space, and so you can go and you can talk to them or interact with them in some way, and it seems like they're not really there. But several of these modern psychiatrists studying this, Wilson Van Dusen in particular, when people would come in and they seem to be schizophrenic and they're hearing voices, he was the first one to go, well, tell me what the voices are saying. And what he'd realized was that this person came in that had schizophrenia. They had maybe a 4th or 5th grade education. And they were talking about this incredibly erudite aspect of physics or engineering or something that this person had no way of knowing. But the first psychologist that actually took seriously that maybe this person is connected to something that is talking to them, maybe these are real voices, and he starts talking to the voices as if they're real people. And some of them would demonstrate their authenticity by saying, okay, well, in 3 days there's going to be an earthquake, talk to me then. Or that they know these principles of science or details about history that the patient had no way of knowing. And so this weird thing that almost nobody wanted to talk about it, that the hypnagogic state, like the DMT state and perhaps like the afterlife state, involves your consciousness leaving your body and going to someplace maybe not physical, or just, maybe like the TV model, it's just a couple of channels away from where we live right now. But so Becca Tarnas is talking about the hypnagogic state and the imaginal realm. And she found this amazing thing. Speaking of the possibility of this being an objective thing, when she was young, her father was a very famous psychiatrist. And she got her PhD in philosophy and religion at the California Institute of Integral Studies. So she's very educated and very astute herself. But when she was young, she was reading something by J.R. Tolkien, the Hobbit guy, Tolkien. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, she had just bought this beautiful copy of the Red Book for Jung for her father. And the reason she bought it for him is because she wanted to read it, and she didn't have the money to read it. So she's I don't want to complicate things with incorrect details. But anyway, she did a comparison of Tolkien's writing with Jung, and what she'd realized is they're both talking about the same place, the same citizens, the same kind of dynamics, even the same topography. And she started comparing, and it became scary how many similarities Jung, when he was exploring his hypnagogic state, Tolkien, who was smart enough to not present it as fact, but just said there's this mythical realm that is like this. But it turns out this realm is an incredibly accurate description of this place that might actually exist. So if we break out of that, modern Western conditioning to the idea that your consciousness and your body aren't necessarily always, locked together, then you start to understand a lot more about the Egyptian practices and the things that we think about now as astral travel and some of that stuff that makes eyes roll, but it seems to be a legitimate part of consciousness. And if you go operative, if you stop thinking about it and you start actually exploring your consciousness, you'll find that it leads to some places that might explain the idea of the collective conscience, how the zeitgeist, how there's certain things that we just all know all of a sudden. And it's because part of our consciousness is our own, but in a way that's hard to put into words, we have this kind of connection or this common pool of consciousness as well that we all draw from. And so Becca is talking about that, and it's just the most interesting and sort of just so ripe with magical overtones.
There's a
and
reason,
the promise that consciousness is more than you think.
Yeah, there's a reason why it's called Middle Earth.
Right?
Yeah, no, seriously. And we got to talk about Richard Casaro. We're sitting here talking about doors, and we don't bring up Richard. Right? Now, his research, again, everybody that is speaking at the symposium for you are all game changers. But Richard Casaro is one of those cats, man, that his research is absolutely game-changing. And before we talk about Richard, well, we're talking about him, is that I bring it up all the time about the cultures around this planet where everything is transoceanic. Somehow the communication is there. Something is universal, whether it's one teacher teaching everybody. I don't know. But Richard's research into this is, if you want proof, what more can you ask for than what Richard brings forward?
Pan-cultural. And it's funny to me because it's just like magnets clicking together. I meet these people and I just, in the weirdest, most removed way, and we just click. And Richard's another one of those people. He's just such a nice, kind man anyway. And he affable, he's not like he's not overbearing. He's not intense. He's not laser-like. He's a perfectly normal, good person. You hang out and have a beer with him. And his work is presented in that same way. It's conversational, and it's
visual.
It's incredibly important, but it's just so easy to understand.
It's
and he
visual.
presents it so well.
Yes, it's visual.
And exactly, because it's visual, it doesn't require faith on your part. He just shows you this thing that is related to what we were talking about, this holy triad, pineal gland, thalamus, and pituitary that make up the third eye, is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. It's Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit. It's the core of every religion. You find this triad of entities that is the external reflection of this triad in us that's responsible for consciousness. So Casaro shows all over the world there's a certain architectural feature that pays homage to that. These triplets or triptychs, he calls them.
Triptychs.
And that's just the start of it. But there's just so much that he does that it shows, as you said, there seems to have been a previous civilization that was a global civilization. Because when you start if you just take modern Western Christianity out of the mix, and again, I'm not here to bash anybody, but a lot of the most ancient cultures all are basically saying the same thing, and they've all been misunderstood sort of in the same way. But if you go to the actual bedrock of the symbolism of all of these different spiritual systems, you'll find those tenets reflected in the architecture. And so a lot of the things we're talking about weren't unique to Egypt. They were just traits of the ancient world. And Casaro is one of those people that shows you that there's this message from the past, and every single culture, it was clearly their most important, most cherished idea, because every single culture erected these monuments. And this is not easy. This is not a casual thing, building these temples to such exact measurements and incorporating the symbolism into all of them. And he just shows in his way, his unassailable way, that not only was this idea system in place, but that the intellect of the past, we're so snobbish nowadays thinking that we're so much smarter than we were in the past. And Casaro presents this evidence that the question isn't why were they so smart? It's more why are we so stupid? And there's a promise in that we can get back to the intelligence that we used to have. And the architecture, oddly enough, tells you how to do that.
Well, if he presented the top of a Mayan pyramid, for instance, right, with three entrances, with three doors,
yes,
and had a very convincing story and the mythology behind it and the religion behind it and the gods, you know what? That's awesome. Yeah. But it's in Central America, South America, it's in Egypt, it's in Asia, it's in Greece, it's the Orkney Islands. I don't care.
Oh yeah, Laird, Scotland.
Right. It's everywhere. It comes to a point when you're looking at this. I don't know why it is something that is generally not talked about and missed, but it's right there in our faces, and you can find it on every continent, in every country, every culture.
Yeah. In fact, it's an interesting art project. If you really want to understand art and develop your eye, You know what art direction is? Like the visual motif of something. Like when you look at Mexican temples, there's this motif or this art direction that's different than Asian, and Asian is different than Egyptian, and Egyptian is different than Babylonian. So the art, the presentation, the aesthetics change from culture to culture, but the structure and the symbolism stay the same.
It's direct. It's direct, and the changes are actually subtle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. The foundation is very direct. Very direct. I wanted to I wanted to talk about Arthur really quick too as well. I'm looking at the clock.
Sure.
I know, man. We're out of time. Okay, you know what? Let's just get straight to Arthur. I wanted to backpedal a little bit, but let's go to Arthur. And where did this is you touched upon this. The list here is the foundation is also intellectuals. I mean, professional intellectuals. Yeah. How were you able to get this list together? And are you researching every single? I mean, are you reading their books and stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a lot of work.
I couldn't even tell you the last time I had more than 2 hours sleep. It's great. It's like I'm at a Thanksgiving banquet. It's all people that I'm just magnetically attracted to, and people that are drawn to Magical Egypt. I've just Christopher's Dunn's new book. Arthur, Ed's work. Honestly, I learned a lot about Ed from watching your interviews with him. Those were just fantastically illuminating.
That was amazing.
And Aaron, Aaron is my surrogate brain. Aaron's such an educated person. He throws such a wide net. But it's a very weird thing that there's so many branches of the science that are mad at Egyptology because no one will listen to them, and no matter how conclusive their evidence, they never get an arena to present their evidence. So one of the things I wanted to do to kind of keep John's work alive and keep the momentum going is throw open, like, how many other scientists out there are like me who have an expertise in their craft and who can demonstrate something that advances our understanding of ancient Egypt. So we have musical engineers, we have chemists, we have philosophy majors, we have lots of technical scientists. For some reason, almost every one of them is a musician or has something to do with an overdeveloped right brain. Versluis is one of those people like Aaron, where he's just highly educated. He's an intellectual, but he brings that organized mind and that intellect to demonstrating the intelligence and the grades or the degree of consciousness. Plato had this pyramid of consciousness where most people operate in this lowest rung of consciousness, which is just your unconscious making you do things. And, maybe 5-10% of your decisions are actually consciously made. And so that's the lowest rung on the pyramid. And then above that, there's what's called geometric thought, when you use logic and reason to actually get someplace in your mind and you're not just constantly reacting, avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. And so that's pretty important to make that leap from the first step to the second. But then the third step is this thing that is what Hermeticism is all about, getting you to this place where you're not only able to draw on logic, but you're able to draw on this weird sense of knowing, this intuition that is a natural property of consciousness, but it's one that, because in the Western world, nobody's trying to get there. But, martial arts movies and old stories, magic, Harry Potter, all of this stuff is still in our psyche because this is all stuff we can do. This is all stuff that you can do. If you were raised in a culture that never let you get out of the chair, you'd be surprised to find out that you can get up and walk around and maybe even run. That seems paranormal if you didn't know you had legs.
No, that's true. And Arthur Versluis, for the audience that may not know who he is a professor at the Department Chair of Religious Studies in the College of Arts and Letters at Michigan State University.
Yeah, he's an impressive cat. He's hard to argue with. Yeah.
Very impressive cat. And here he is speaking at your symposium. Is this further evidence of professional academics starting to come into our circle? Like Robert Schoch, for instance, where they're starting to blend a little bit. Are we starting to overlap?
Yeah. Robert was an early adopter, and it's why he's just so, a million reasons. He's an awesome guy. It's starting. The tide is turning. There was a new, when John was still alive, we talked a bit about this. In Russia, a new dictionary or encyclopedia, the new, whatever the big encyclopedia is there, came out. And for the first time, an orthodox educational publication acknowledged John West's Sphinx theory as a viable alternative to Egyptology. So very slowly, and then, when Göbekli Tepe happened, that was just, that was the slam dunk.
Right.
Very slowly, fields who don't have an axe to grind are joining the fight. So it takes me so long to produce the formal episodes of Egypt, but we've snowballed and snowballed where all these like minds are coming together, and our think tank that was originally just 3 of us, and then it was 5 of us, and now there's 30 or 40 people in this collective, and we're all bringing our core aptitudes and our weird savantisms to this subject. And so I've got tired of being the bottleneck in all of this, that we can only go as fast as I can produce these shows. And so Venice has created this symposium so that the world doesn't have to wait for me to get around to building all these episodes, that we just have this festival of troublemakers who are really redefining humanity. They're redefining consciousness, and they're not a bunch of new age nutcases. You live in Los Angeles. I'm sure more kooks per square inch. Remember, Los Angeles, second only to San Francisco, Los Angeles is so full of insane people. Mm-hmm. And it kind of ruins the genre for careful, meticulous scientists. And so all of the people who really understand that there's legitimate science to be done here, and this giant field of snow that no one's walked on because there's so many fences around it, it's a chance for really bright, forward-thinking people to make a name for themselves by demonstrating that, as I'd said, the rest of the sciences should be consulted before the last word is said about Egypt. And when you look at it through the eyes of the sciences, it's a whole different animal. And it's more like a science fiction. It's like a crashed UFO that we reverse engineer rather than some, archaic historical curiosity.
We've got to say goodnight, but I want to ask you this. With all of the knowledge that you have surrounded yourself with, starting with Shock and Jaws, and I like that, Shock and Jaws, and
you can hang a war on that,
right? To today, Chance, what is the one thing that you have learned?
I would say the thing that I learned, the big top line is, this is a story. It's not a religion. It's a science. It's a science that was directed at me. It was a science that was directed at you. This is not for academics. This is for everyone with a brain that wants to understand it. This is for everyone who recognizes something they can't put into words in ancient Egypt. One of the reasons I'm excited about getting you on the show is that you are a unique individual, that you're a clearinghouse for the greatest minds on earth. And all of those most amazing ideas have all channeled through your brain. And so I'm really excited about getting in there and walking around with a flashlight.
Well, and we're going to do that. And I'll leave you with this. What I have learned with everything that I have compiled, and you're absolutely right. It is all. I'm like a calendar, like draining spaghetti, right? I'm a filter, right? I'm a filter. Right. Is that we don't know nothing.
Yeah, we're just getting started.
We don't, Hancock, when he says we have amnesia, he's not kidding about that. We know absolutely nothing, and they have made sure that we don't learn. And that's really the truth. And when I say they, I'm talking about collectively, corporations and governments and religions and schools, where they have choked us down and choked us down and choked us down. I had a teacher in 8th grade. I don't remember his name, but he taught this class, Indiana history. And in this class, and this is how outside of the box this guy was. And he was probably 60, 65. Compared to education today in 8th grade, right? He actually uttered these words, and I never forgot. It changed my life. He goes, Graham Hancock talks about it today, but this was in 8th grade in Indiana. He said, 3 miles of ice came across Canada and the United States and flattened everything out. I need you to imagine 3 miles of ice above your head right now. And now, okay, so then he says, and then I stopped and left these mounds that are across southern Indiana that were built by a culture and a civilization that we know nothing about. And I stopped and I just thought about the significance of what, right? They don't teach that today in school.
Yeah.
How radical was that teacher? And today it's Graham Hancock and you and Shock and others that are bringing this back to us because we have amnesia.
And we want to know if there is anything to that idea of anamnesis. We already know, when you get your brain split, or when they were doing those split brain experiments in the 70s, your right brain would know something and your left brain would know that you know it, but it didn't know how you knew it. And it's this weird, I guess that's what intuition is. People know there's something there. We know it, and we're just waiting for somebody to say it.
Yeah, it's so funny now when anything just smells a little funny when you hear something or when you're taught something, people just jump on the keyboard now. They can go and research. They can call you on what you are saying. And I'm talking about governments and universities and school systems. If you're going to feed a line of BS, I want to use other words, but if you're going to feed that line, you better be able to back it up, because today we have the ability to call you on it. And that's why I love where we are today and the fact that you're doing the symposium. Thank you so much, Chance.
Well said. Thanks, Jimmy.
And give my best to Venice, and I will see you bright and early. You keep saying tomorrow evening. It's not for us here.
Sorry. Oh, that's right. Don't listen to my time, my local time. It's all sadistically late for me, but it's a good, friendly time for the States and for Europe.
And we're starting at noon tomorrow, right?
Excellent.
My time. Okay. I'm just making sure. I'll see you tomorrow. Chance
all right, my
Gardner,
friend. Thank you so much.
Give my best to Venice, and I'll see you first thing in the morning.
Cheers.
Chance Gardner, Magical Egypt. I've got to get out of here. I'm looking at the clock, and man, I ran to the very end. And I'll see everybody tomorrow. It is magicalegypt.com. Go and get your symposium tickets. Chance and I are going to kick it off tomorrow for 3 hours. Fade to Black's executive producers Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster Drew the Geek. Music Doug Aldrich. Intro Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA The Planet. It's broadcast owned and copyrighted 2018 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'll see everybody tomorrow at the symposium. Tomorrow night, Jason Rice is here. Until then, everybody be safe. Go Beckley Tappy.